Hello there, my spookies. It's your narrator and host, Enrique Couto here. Step right up and mind the gaps between the boards. They're deeper than they look. Tonight, Weekly Spooky presents a dive into the deep vault of horrors we have, with a little Fairground Frights. 7 tales of cotton candy that tastes like dust, prizes that come with an additional cost later, and rides that don't always end where they began. Behind the sideshow curtain, a cabinet of curiosities keeps souvenirs that remember every one of their owners and how they die. A painted grin follows you past the funhouse mirrors, and a smaller grin on a little clown that wasn't there a second ago follows you too. In the arcade, a humming cabinet knows your name and is very sure you owe it another quarter to start. So get your hand stamped, keep your eyes on your operator at all times, and whatever you do, don't take the free upgrade to a longer ride. Make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because Weekly Spooky brings you something new and terrifying every Wednesday. Now, enjoy the ride, and don't just keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle. Just try to keep them at all.
I'm not here.
Fun in Funerals by David O'Hanlon. The death of a clown is no laughing matter. It leaves a bleak, unhappy void in the universe equal to the amount of joy the departed had caused. Fennis Farcemeister, white face of the Amityville Shutter, had brought happiness to millions. His body rested in the lavender casket with his bright red shoes sticking straight up and his orange hair jutting over the side. Before him, a pedestal, too large for its contents, stood erect as a grim reminder of the task to come. The remainder of his shutter mourned in their own ways while they awaited the arrival of Pastor Crumb. "How are we supposed to close the lid?" Popsy Pringle asked gruffly, wiggling the toe of Fennis's shoe. "Might as well just slap some Crocs on him." "You don't have to be in such a hurry, Popsy," Sweet Pea Cheapskate sobbed. Sweet Brother Blippy put an arm around her shoulders and nodded in agreement. The twins were the Shutter's resident tramps. The tears rolled down Blippy's rotund cheeks and disappeared in the smear of his grease paint beard. The siblings both focused on the pedestal, or, more accurately, the egg resting atop it. Blippy chewed his lip nervously and tipped his torn top hat respectfully. "We all know you'll be the next Whiteface," he said softly. "You don't have to be so eager to take it. Callousness is for humans. Clowns are better than that." Popsy groaned and gave his nose a squeak. "Spare me." Blippy gasped at the insulting gesture and sobbed on his sister's shoulder. Waldo Tatter's tie-dye shit-kickers clopped across the wood floors with his spurs jangling until he stood before the egg. Its scaly vermilion shell was painted with Fennis's likeness, and locks of his hair snipped and glued to the sides. Every clown had an egg in their Shutter's reliquary. Waldo traced his fingers across the curve of the egg. He took off his cowboy hat and pressed it to his denim shirt. Rodeo clowns were rogues and rarely allowed membership in a Shutter. Fennis saw beyond Waldo's wily, psychotic demeanor, however. "Don't you worry none, partner," the cowboy said lowly. "We won't take too long." "We'd better not." Popsy checked his oversized watch. "Where the hell is Crumb? No one likes a sad clown." Sweet squirmed uncomfortably in her pew. She'd seen a Pierrot once. It was the worst thing that could happen to a clown. The code called for funerary games so that the laughter of the Shutter could carry the soul to the Palace of Joy. If the games didn't appease the soul of the departed clown, however, it would become trapped in the void, and they would return as a Pierrot, a hideous, undead monstrosity that devoured flesh and spread colrophobia. You can't bring joy if the audience thinks you might eat their faces. The code don't cop to convenience, Waldo reminded him. He looked at the flower on Fennis's lapel. Its petals danced in the artificial wind of the oscillating fan. But Fennis remained still. Rather get on with the chase myself, all the same. It'll be a hell of a blow-off. Blippy tugged the handkerchief from his breast pocket, dragging out an extra 3 feet of multicolored linen. He blew his nose on it and folded it back into his pocket. A sad smile stretched across his chubby cheeks. Fennis will be able to rest easy in the palace seeing the party we threw for him. Gonna be a different kind of party if and we don't get a move on. Waldo patted the egg and sighed. He turned to Popsy. Who's the peckerhead anyway? His name is Al, a new voice said. Al Musing. The shutter turned their attention to the tiny trapezoidal door leading to the church's rectory. Pastor Crumb's 4-foot height made it through the door easily, but the prisoner he escorted on a leash took to crawling on his knees to fit through. Pastor Crumb jerked backward as the leather strap went taut. He huffed and waited for the prisoner to catch up, using the moment to attend an urgent itch south of his bulging belly. Al doesn't like clowns, the pastor said. He adjusted the white collar beneath his second chin. I imagine he's really going to hate us after tonight. The shutter laughed. Al tried to stand when 18 inches of checkered vinyl kicked him square between the shoulders. Popsy knelt on the human's back and held his hand out to Pastor Crumb. Enough propriety. Give me the biscuit. Crumb took the revolver from the inside of his jacket and twirled it clumsily on his finger. He shook his head. We have one more point of business. He waved for Popsy to move. The august clown growled, but rose nonetheless. Popsy rolled his gloved hand theatrically and gave a phony bow. He slapped the toe of his shoe down on Al's face. There's no reason for you to get up, he said, the nub of the smoldering stogie between his yellow teeth. Get on with it, Pastor. Fennis Farcemeister was a clown of the highest order. We gather here not to just honor the code, he glared over his shoulder at Popsy, nor to anoint a new white face. We are here to say a final goodbye to a clown that was more than a mere leader or friend. Fennis was a mentor when we were ignorant, a father when we were alone, and a force of will when we were rebellious. He brought joy to the humans like no other clown before him, and in doing so he restored this shutter to a place of reverence among all clown kin. Amen, Pastor Crumb, Sweet agreed. Fennis did such wondrous works in his 2.5 centuries, Crumb continued. Why, if it weren't for him, we might not even have the squirting flower gag. He took juggling to new heights, literally, by doing it on the tightrope. He restored the pudding bag to glory when he showed the humans how to make their whoopee cushions. There has never been a more beloved and potent clown than Fennis, and never shall there be. We have had a grand day of remembrance. However, the time has now come to say our final goodbye. Goodbye, they all shouted in unison. Pastor Crumb flipped the lid of the casket shut on Fennis's corpse. It remained propped open by the bulbous toes of his shoes. The shutter chuckled at Fennis's final gag. Crumb's belly jiggled with raucous laughter. His laughter cut off as abruptly as hitting pause. His smile fell, and the grease paint did nothing to hide the dour expression etched on his face. Al Musing, you have been chosen as the guest of honor, Crumb grumbled. He waved his fingers to signal Popsy away. A clown is dead. A human must die. That is the code to which both our kind are bound. Al stood up slowly and tore the burlap sack off his head. He glared around the room at each of the clowns. You gotta be fucking kidding me! Do we look like the joking kind? Blippy asked. Sweet stood and sauntered to the casket. She dragged a wicker basket from underneath its stand and knelt with a smile toward Al before dumping the contents out. Her aquamarine hair tapered to fuchsia ends that acted like arrows directing all gazes to the struggling buttons of her unkempt hobo-chic blouse. It took great effort, but finally Al's eyes jumped from the cleavage to the cleavers skittering across the floor. They were oversized and ancient, specked with rust and old blood, and accompanied by matching mallets. So, Al cleared his throat. Which one of you makes the balloon animals? We all do, dummy, Blippi informed him. Good. Start with a cock and go fuck yourselves. Waldo chuckled. Partner's got some guts. I'll be wearing them like a big pink boa, Sweet hissed sordidly. The blade of her cleaver scraped a divot in the floor. I'll keep you alive while I pull them out, so you can tell me how ravishing I look before I split your skull open. As appealing as that sounds, how about we just split and fuck each other silly? Al winked and blew her a kiss. Blippi jumped up fast enough to knock the church pew over. That's my sister, dickweed! Your sister? Al gave the clown a critical once-over. Your mom had an affair. You son of a bitch! Enough tomfoolery, Crumb shouted. He jammed the revolver into Al's waistband. We're not animals. We'll give you a shot. But just one. Fuck it, why not? Al pulled the leash off his neck and threw it down. What's the game? Time for games is past, Popsy said. The chase begins now. All you gotta do is survive until midnight. Al grabbed Popsy's hand. The clown jerked away, but Al held firm and turned his arm over to look at the face of the oversized watch. 47 minutes remaining. Probably be easier just to kill you all, Al suggested. That's funny. Popsy shoved Al away from him. You're a real comic, Al. Choke on my McNuggets, Ronald. Al jogged for the door. The clown set off giant party poppers, showering him with confetti, and whooped with excitement behind him. Once he was outside, he took in his surroundings quickly. A polka-dot Volkswagen Beetle was parked along the front of the clown church, which looked more like a converted funhouse with its colorful facade and odd angles. It was also smack dab in the middle of fucking nowhere. Rows of tombstones extended as far as he could see by the moonlight. All right, think, Al. You need a plan. He had a head start, a gun with one bullet, and 5 clowns hell-bent on murdering him in less than an hour. The outline of a mausoleum then caught his eye. You can't spell slaughter without a laugh. A train whistle screamed inside the church. Waldo rubbed his ears. Crusty H. Christ, Blippi! Pastor Crumb mirrored Waldo. You dolt! Sorry. Blippi hung his head and tucked the whistle into his overalls. I just wanted to let everyone know the chase is starting. We're all in the same room, dipshit. Popsy slapped him in the back of the head. Besides, Crumb starts the chase. Crumb patted Fennis's corpse and proceeded to the pulpit. Popsy tapped the back of his cleaver against the metal head of the mallet until he got the precise rhythm. The toes of clown shoes tapped in harmony with it. Popsy scowled and licked his lips with excitement. Strike up the band. We got us a human to kill, Popsy roared. Crumb pressed the button and Stars and Stripes Forever blared to life through the church's PA system. The 4 others roared and stormed for the building in pursuit of their quarry. Blippi took aim and smashed the handle free from the mausoleum door. It wasn't his first chase, and the prey usually went straight to the nearest shelter. He twirled the mallet in his hands and kicked open the door with a floppy, torn shoe. Sweet rushed into the building with her weapons at the ready. The place was empty. The bronze nameplates of the dead spread across the 2 long side walls, and the back wall was occupied almost entirely by a stained glass window depicting the first clown at the center and his 6 disciples in pains around him. Sweet crossed herself and approached the ornate tomb that sat in the center of the room. She took a deep breath and pressed against the top with her shoulder. Its heavy, stone lid scraped open, slowly. She expected Al Musing to reach out for her, but nothing happened. She peeked inside and muttered an apology to the skeletal remains within the tomb. Doughy the Mime rested as silently in death as he had been in life. Sweet turned to her brother and shrugged. "He's not here, Blippy." She looked around the otherwise empty room. "Guess we got it wrong this time." "Rats!" Blip threw his hammer down with a clatter. "I just knew he'd come straight here. Where else could he be?" "Probably headed to the hedge maze. Let's meet Waldo there," Sweet suggested. The two tramps skulk out the front door and froze as the headlights blazed before them. Circus music sounded from the VW Bug's horn as it sped toward them, throwing a shower of dirt and grass from its spinning tires. Sweet cartwheeled out of the way, but Blippy was too slow. "Sorry to bug you," Owl howled with a laugh. The car struck Blippy low, flipping him onto the hood. His face smacked against the windshield, streaking the glass with his grease paint. Al smiled at him from the other side. The car smashed through the front wall, ramped off the tomb of Doughy, and launched into the air. They crashed through the massive window, showering the yard beyond in its psychedelic hail. The car landed hard. The tires exploded, the shocks collapsed, but its momentum kept the Beetle careening forward until it hit the oak tree. Al batted the airbag down and beat his shoulder against the bent door. It finally squeaked open and fell off beside the car. Al got out and popped his neck with a groan. Blippy B. Cheapskate's eyes dangled from his skull, forced out by the impact. The rest of him just burst open like a confetti-filled balloon animal and sprayed the area in viscera. Al chuckled. "Guess that answers how many cars you can fit in a clown." Sweet jumped over the car and slashed at Al with the cleaver. He ducked and rolled, grabbing the car door and swinging it by the window frame to bat the diminutive nymph away. "Let me get the door for you," Al quipped. "Hardy fucking har har," Sweet spat blood. "With jokes like that, you could be a birthday clown." "Do you think I have the chops?" "I'll give you some chops." Sweet lunged forward. Al held the car door up like a shield. Sweet's cleaver cut through the thin metal with ease. Al fell backwards, flipping the tramp over him in the process. He snapped to his feet, but Sweet was up before him and climbed his body, her stockinged legs wrapped around his neck. She locked her ankles behind his back, twisted her fingers into his mop of blonde hair, and squeezed her thighs tighter. "Lucky fella, dying with your face in my cotton candy." Sweet laughed maniacally as Al weakened and fell to his knees. Sweet dropped backwards, grabbing her own ankle to tighten the hold. Al threw ever-weakening punches at her. She drove her elbow into the top of his head like a jackhammer. Al slumped over. His fingers tapped and dragged through the grass for anything that might help. "Enough clowning around!" Sweet stretched out, reaching for her cleaver. "I'm going to cut off all your appendages in alphabetical order." Ah! Sweet rolled away from Al. She prodded the ragged hole in her thigh tentatively. The human choked and gagged behind her. "Fucking clowns always leave a funny taste in my mouth." Al coughed, scouring his bloody face with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. Blood spurted between Sweet's fingers while she worked a fuchsia tie from a pigtail to tourniquet the gaping bite mark. She seized the cleaver while she could and turned around to find him missing. "Fuck!" Sweet panned around, searching for him. She limped back to the church to regroup with Pastor Crumb. In case the others had failed to kill Al in the allotted time, someone would need to be there to smash the egg. Whoever it was would be the next whiteface. And Popsy would not be pleased. It beat the alternative. Sweet stopped in her tracks. Of course, if the human killed them all, there'd be no one left to laugh for any of their spirits. Sweet gulped at the thought. She needed to stay in the hunt. Al groaned and rubbed a rising knot on the back of his head. The she-clown had kicked his ass. He needed to fight smarter. If he made it to midnight, they'd all leave him alone. That's what they said anyhow. If you can't trust a clown to keep his word, then who can you trust? He crept along the hedgerow following the shouted goading of one of his hunters. He slipped through a gap in the wall and realized he was standing in a maze. "Of course I fucking am," he whispered. Well-spaced LED lights shone on the gravel track between the verdant walls on either side of him. They didn't give him much light, but enough to pick out the deep grooves of cowboy boot tracks. He stayed low as much to keep his eye on the trail as to avoid detection. His sneakers gave him some advantage on the shifting rocks. As he moved through the corridors, the cowboy's voice grew louder. Then he heard the jingle-jangle of the spurs. Al sank to his knees and crawled to the edge of another opening, peeking around cautiously. The boot heel struck him square in the forehead. Al toppled over, blinking spots from his vision. He got to his hands and knees when a kick met his ribs. "Giddy up, fuckaroo!" He watched the rodeo clown, thumbs hooked on his belt loops, dancing closer to him. The tie-dye boots shuffled through the gravel and then buried into his side again and again. Al tried to escape. Waldo kept pace with the human, kicking him like a soccer ball as he rolled away from the deranged clown. Al felt the poke of branches in his back when he reached the wall. Another solid kick went into his gut. His microwave dinner splattered on the clown's boots. "You dirty sumbitch!" Waldo licked his glossy red lips. "I'm gonna line dance your fucking face into pudding for that." Waldo's smile faded when he saw the gun barrel jabbed into his crotch. He patted the air and took 2 steps back. "Ever seen a clown juggle without any balls?" Al groaned and pressed himself up, keeping the gun trained on Waldo. He steadied his aim between the clown's eyes. "You only got the one shot, partner." "There's only one of you." Al straightened his aim and squeezed the trigger. The flag snapped out of the barrel, unfurling in an orange banner that read, "Bang," in big purple letters. Al sputtered his lips and shook his head. Waldo slapped his thighs and whooped happily. The clown danced in a circle, booming with laughter at the timeless gag. He turned back around and snapped his fingers, holding them at his hips like firing pistols. The miniature flagstaff rammed straight through his eye. Al swung the dummy revolver like a hammer, driving the spike through the back of Waldo's skull. The flag sticking out of his face fluttered lightly in the breeze. Bang! "You're dead." The gloved hands burst through the brush and seized Al around the throat. He battered the geometrically patterned yellow silk sleeves. His knuckles clanked off the oversized wristwatch. The clown's muscles tensed, and Al's face was pulled closer to the protruding branches. Al closed his eyes tightly, feeling the twigs clawing at his lips to get to the soft tissue beneath. "He who laughs last," Popsy shouted with a great guffaw. Al reached through the bush and grabbed the first thing he could. Popsy's laughter turned to high-pitched wailing. "Let me go!" Al growled. Popsy's white-gloved fingers sprang open and Al released him. The human strolled around the corner, popping his knuckles. Popsy rubbed his sore crotch and growled angrily. "All right, bozo big dick, it's just you and me," he said. "We're about out of time." Popsy checked his watch. "Shit. I really wanted to enjoy killing you, but I can't be late getting back to the church. Spent too many years in the shadow of Fennis. It's my time to be the whiteface." "You killed your boss, didn't you?" Popsy glared at him quizzically. "How'd you know?" Al shrugged. "Everyone wants to kill their boss." "You killed Fennis?" a soft melodic voice said from the shadow between the 2 lights. He was never going to rest until his egg was smashed. That's why you were in such a rush to kill this human." "You two clearly have things to discuss," Al said, holding his hands up defensively. "I'll show myself out." "You're not going anywhere." Popsy adjusted his absurdly large tie. "Sweet, I understand you're pissed." Sweet hobbled forward, brandishing her cleaver. "Oh, that's an understatement." "If the human lives, Fennis becomes a Perot." Popsy drew his weapons from his pockets. "We have to kill him first. It's the code." Sweet looked at Al, then back to Popsy. She kicked the gravel with a frustrated shriek. "Two of us have a better chance, Sweet." Popsy smiled at her. Al took his shot while the August was distracted. He lunged to tackle him only for the hammer to come down on the small of his back. Popsy drove a knee into Al's chin, the human wrapped up in Popsy's legs. The clown shimmied, trying to get his ridiculous shoes through Al's grip. "Finish him, Sweet," Popsy shouted. Sweet gripped the cleaver in both hands and raised it high as she stalked closer. "Break the egg!" Al yelled. Popsy stopped struggling. Sweet lowered her weapon slightly. "Become the Whiteface," Al said, shuffling his feet under him. "Stop him!" "No," Popsy hissed. He glared at Al, then shot a glance to Sweet. Her tongue pressed against her cheek as she thought it over. If she smashed the egg, she would be the Whiteface, and her and Crumb would send him to the alley for trial. That couldn't happen. There was only one punishment for Jestercide. The thought of such horrors sent shivers up Popsy's spine and steeled his nerve. He swung his own cleaver. Sweet's head popped off her shoulders in a fountain of blood. She stumbled about, tripping over Al and collapsing beside him. The stump gushed. Her body twitched. And Popsy laughed malevolently. "Sweetie, you always did give the best head." Al kicked off, pulling Popsy's legs out from under him. He grabbed Sweet's cleaver and swung at the August, slicing the toe of his shoe off, but missing the meat inside. Popsy rolled and kicked the knife from Al's hand before scrambling back to his feet. Al spotted Popsy's mallet and rolled across the ground, scooping it and coming to his knees in a single motion. Popsy brought his cleaver down for a killing blow. Al deflected it and smashed the clown's ankle with the hammer. Al tried to tackle him again and was successful. The mallet swung wildly. It struck Popsy's bright red nose with a squeak that drowned out the crunch of the bone. Al laughed. It was all he could do. Laugh and swing. Hit and squeak. Over and over. Until Popsy's face collapsed and the mallet just made a sticky, thick smack with each repeated blow. Al finally stopped and came to his senses. He checked Popsy's watch and headed back to the church. There was still one clown left to kill, and only 4 minutes to do it in. Al stepped into the clown church and saw Pastor Crumb writhing on the floor. The top of a white head with flocks of orange hair was buried in his abdomen, munching noisily on the pastor's guts. The Perot lifted its gore-streaked face and hissed. "You must be the famous Penis the Clown everyone's been telling me about." Fennis stood in a hunkered, crooked mockery of normalcy. He tore at his clothing, revealing the Farcemeister family name across his powerful chest. The clown's bared teeth wiggled in their sockets and fell away as fangs pushed through the gums to take their place. Smoke rose from his pores, steaming his grease paint from his face and taking the flesh with it. Bone showed through in the original pattern of his makeup. The clown shuddered and his chest tore open with a great blooming flower that spurted its nectar into steaming puddles on the floor. The Pierrot lunged forward. Al cocked back the mallet and took aim at the egg resting on its pedestal. He flung the weapon at it and missed. The hammer sailed harmlessly over it and struck the massive cross behind the podium. The ornament rocked on its hangers. Fennis drew closer to Al, running his now clawed hands, tearing at the floorboards like a circus monkey. Fennis sprang into the air. The clown seemed to fall in slow motion as Al awaited his demise. The cross crashed down on Fennis's coffin, knocking it into the pedestal and tipping it over. The vermilion egg hit the floor a moment before Fennis landed on Al. The egg shattered, splattering the floor with its gooey, unnatural contents. Fennis exploded. The force knocked Al to the floor ahead of a tidal wave of viscera and blood that washed over him. He worked to untangle himself from a length of intestine and stood up, dripping with clown goo. "I'll probably laugh about this later." He spat out a piece of flesh and shook his head. "I hate clowns." Al limped toward the exit. He just wanted to go home, back to his shitty basement apartment with his Hot Pockets and his porn collection, and he never wanted to see another fucking clown. He threw open the door of the church and groaned. Sweet was ambling toward him with her head in her hands. Blippy dragged his remains across the graveyard lawn. The snapping of the bang flag blowing in the wind drew his attention to Waldo helping Popsy navigate the headstones. Al slammed the door and backed away from it. The knob started to turn. "It's midnight," he sobbed. "I made it! This isn't fair!" "No." A pair of bloody hands clutched his shoulders, and Pastor Crumb leaned close to his ear with a giggle. "It's a circus." The door creaked open, and the others shambled in. Crumb bit into Al's cheek, and the others closed in around him. Al saw their fangs and the bones showing where their makeup had been. There was no one left in the shutter, no one to bring their souls to joy anymore. Sweet threw her head at him, and the damn thing latched onto his chest while Crumb dragged him to the floor. Popsy stood over him. His words came in a gurgled mess. "Laughter never dies." Babes in Terrorland by Morgan Moore. As with many holiday seasons before it, parents and children flocked to Barron's toy store in the village of Green Seas. In the middle of the crowd was Justin Barron, a 14-year-old boy with an apron featuring a hand-sewn version of the store's logo in the middle. Justin was staying with his grandmother, the owner of the store, for the holidays while his parents were away on a business trip. He was enlisted to lend a hand almost immediately upon his arrival, with it being the store's busiest time of year. Justin could never understand how she managed it all on her own, but she had been doing it ever since his grandfather died a few years ago, and was managing it successfully, somehow. Justin moved around the store as best he could, seeing how crowded the small store was and all. The building itself was an old brownstone, with the store situated on the ground floor and Mrs. Barron's home on the second. The store could become a claustrophobic nightmare when business was booming, but he managed stocking the shelves and helping out customers as best he could. By the time 3 o'clock came around, Justin was spent and was ready for the day to be over so he could finally get some rest. Those thoughts were interrupted when he laid eyes on Kathy Wilcox. He had known her since 4th grade and had a crush on her that never faded. Justin always wanted to tell her how he felt, but he could never muster up the courage to do it. Somehow he could picture everything he wanted to say, but any time he saw her, it all vanished. Justin felt himself beginning to melt as he kept looking at her. His face turned bright red, and immediately Justin began to do some busy work around the area, trying to disguise the fact that he had been staring at her. Justin's heart beat faster and faster, as if somebody was pounding away on a drum, but that came to an immediate halt when he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned around and saw Kathy there. "Hi, Justin," Kathy said sweetly. "Hi, Kathy," Justin stammered, his face feeling like it was on fire. Kathy gave him an intimate smile, her blue eyes seeming to shimmer to Justin. "Mind if I ask you a question?" Uh-oh, Justin thought. She's gonna chew me out for looking at her, and in the middle of the store, too. Everybody's gonna think I'm some perv. "Sure," Justin responded after a brief pause. "Could you help me and my sister real quick?" What a relief, Justin thought. "Oh, yeah, for sure. What do you guys need?" he asked. She then began to walk away down an aisle. Justin followed close behind her. "My sister found something she wants, but I can't reach it, and neither can she. I saw you and thought I'd ask if you could bring it down for me, since you're so tall and all," Kathy explained. "Oh, yeah, I should be able to get it for you," Justin replied with a smile. Kathy returned the smile. "Man, she's so cute," Justin thought, as they kept walking beside one another. The two eventually got to their location and joined Kathy's sister, Janet. Upon seeing Justin and the apron identifying him as a store employee, Janet pointed upwards toward the top of the shelf she was standing at. "That one, please," Janet asked Justin. Justin looked up to where the child pointed and saw a clown doll. The doll had been in the store ever since he could remember. It had a wooden head and hands and was dressed in a hand-sewn outfit colored silver and blue. A jester hat adorned its head, bells dangling down playfully. Justin had always thought it looked creepy, and other people must have thought the same, as the doll had been around the store ever since he was a child. But maybe, finally, someone had found the doll appealing and wanted to give it a home. Justin smiled and reached up, just barely able to get the doll. He got a grip on it and brought it down, handing it gently to the little girl. "Here you go," Justin said. Janet smiled as she held and stared at the doll. Kathy turned to Justin and gave him a big smile. He returned it in kind. "I want him," Janet responded energetically as she held the clown doll up to the two. "How much is it?" Kathy asked Justin. "I'm not sure. It doesn't look like it has a tag on it." "Let's ask my grandma," Justin said. They arrived at the register to find Justin's grandmother smiling at the three. "There you are, Justin. What cute friends you have there," she said. Kathy blushed lightly at the comment. "Hey, Grandma, how much is this? There's no tag on it or even a sign on the shelf it was on." His grandmother's smile turned to a slight frown. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. That doll isn't for sale. I only keep it on the shelf for decoration," she explained as sweetly as possible. "But I want it," Janet told her. "Are you sure you're not able to sell it?" Kathy asked. "Unfortunately, I am, dear. My husband made the doll many years ago for Justin's mother, and it just has too much sentimental value for me to sell it. It's been watching over the store for years," Justin's grandma explained to the three. Janet frowned, tears starting to well up. Justin smiled a little bit at the two and at his grandma. "It's all right, I'll put him back," Justin said. He then made a motion with his head for Kathy and Janet to follow him. The three of them made their way back to the aisle. Janet looked utterly devastated that she couldn't have the doll, and Kathy looked equally saddened for her sister. Once they got back to the aisle, Justin put the doll back up. He then turned to Kathy with a small grin. She tilted her head in confusion. "What is it? Why are you grinning like that?" she asked. "Because I know of a way to get that doll for Janet," he explained. Janet's face brightened up at once. "Really? How?" Justin moved in a bit closer to Kathy so that he could talk to her in semi-privacy. Janet frowned when she realized what was going on. "My grandma is going to go out to a party tonight, and I'll be alone for hours. Come on by around 8 and I'll let you in. We can get the doll then," he explained to her. "But she'll notice, won't she?" Kathy asked. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Just be here by 8. Later that night, Justin made his way downstairs to the store and opened the front door to find Kathy and Janet standing there. Justin frowned a tiny bit as the two girls made their way inside. "Why'd you bring your sister?" he asked, doing his best to hide his disappointment that it wasn't just Kathy. "She wanted to come and I couldn't get her to stay home without spilling the beans. I told my parents I was going out with friends and she threatened to tell them what I was really doing," Kathy explained. "I mean, it isn't entirely untrue. You are hanging out with a friend," Justin said with a small smile. "I'm going," Janet blurted out and ran towards the aisle with the doll. "So, how are you going to explain this to your grandma?" Kathy asked as she walked past a display of a toy war scene. "Oh, I'm going to tell her I ordered a pizza and just forgot to lock the door on my way back up. I'll take some money out of the register and hide a few other toys, maybe knock some displays over and make it look like somebody broke in and robbed the place," he explained. "That's pretty clever. Mean, but clever," she responded as she stopped by the register, Justin stopping in front of her. "Hey." "What can I say?" Justin said. Kathy smiled a bit as she fiddled with some small toys by the register. She looked around, then returned her gaze to Justin. "Why are you doing this for us? Why are you risking getting into so much trouble?" His mind raced at 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to figure out how to explain why he was so willing to help her sister out. No, help her out. Before he could give it any more thought, he blurted out his response. "It's because I like you. I've always liked you. I think you're sweet and cute, and I just wanted to help because I like you and I thought maybe you'd like me back if I did it." He gasped for breath. Justin closed his eyes and took several deep breaths, eventually regaining control of his breathing. After a few brief minutes, he opened his eyes. Finding that Kathy was staring at him, her mouth dropped open some, and her eyes wide. Dread filled Justin, his heart beating harder and harder. Oh no, she's gonna leave and never speak to me again and tell everybody I'm a loser and a freak. But she surprised him by smiling at him, warmly and widely. Justin slowly smiled back. They brought their faces close to one another, only a hair's breadth apart. The scream that ripped through the air put an end to that. "Janet!" Kathy called out and rushed toward the location the scream emanated from, Justin following in her wake. The duo arrived to find Janet, laying on the floor screaming and crying in agony, her eye sockets bleeding profusely. As for the former resident of those yawning black holes, they were in the hands of the clown doll. The toy turned its head and looked at them. Justin and Kathy bolted from the aisle, the clown doll right behind them. As they ran down the aisles, Kathy shrieked as the other toys began to spring from the shelves and joined the hunt. Stuffed bears and lions pawed at them with vicious claws that sprang from their plush paws as metal model cars pelted down on the teens like rain, leaving bruises and cuts. Justin managed to grab a baseball bat from a nearby barrel and started swinging away as Kathy grabbed a stick horse and did the same. The two sent toys flying left and right, but more and more came forth. Soon Justin and Kathy found themselves surrounded. They continued to swing away, but soon the terror toys grabbed their weapons and pulled them away, leaving the pair defenseless. Justin and Kathy looked at each other and took hold of each other's hand, ready to accept their doomed fate. The store lights came alive and bathed everything in a warm fluorescent glow, causing the pair to start. "Oh no, look at this mess," the voice of Justin's grandmother rang out. The older woman looked around at all the toys, who now looked back at her. She stopped a few feet away from the rattled teens. "Grandma, what's going on? Why are you home?" Justin spat out in a mix of confusion and anger. "And why did they attack us? And my sister, my God, Janet!" Kathy started but soon stopped as she succumbed to raw grief. The senior shook her head and sighed. "I suppose I should explain. You see, these toys, all of them, they come alive every nightfall." But why? How?" Justin demanded. "Justin, dear, your grandfather made them that way. Business hasn't been the same for years, not since that damn department store opened up. Then, when we learned your grandpa didn't have long left, he was afraid of what would happen to the store. To me, it was his opinion that without any help the store would have shut down, so he decided to create some help. Your grandfather came across a strange scroll during the war in a bombed-out toy store, a store he swore was filled with screaming, burning toys. You can guess the rest. These toys have been cleaning, stocking, and providing security, as you've seen, here ever since. These wonderful toys, they're loyal and always have been, and always will be." Justin and Kathy were taken aback. They believed it all, after all. How could they not? But something still bothered them. "Oh, thank God. We're safe then," Kathy told them. The two smiled as they looked at each other, and then at Justin's grandma. But the smiles faded as they saw that the elder in front of them was grim. "Grandma?" Justin started with a shaky voice. "I'm sorry, love, but you were trespassing. You know I don't like you coming down here at night, to say nothing of your friend here and her sister. The store was closed. Besides, they don't move during the day, but they can still hear. When I left for the party, they told me about your little plan. That's why I came back early." "You mean you're going to turn us into the police?" Kathy asked. "No. Unfortunately for you two, I leave all my security matters up to them. And I believe I know what they'll do with you," she explained. The toy soldiers from the war scene filed in, aiming their guns at the teenagers. Justin and Kathy's faces displayed pure and utter terror. With that, Justin's grandmother left and made her way to the stairs. She looked over at the two again and shook her head and sighed. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she turned off the lights. A stream of sharp bangs filled the store. Ophiuchus by Daniel Wilder. Hey, my name is Darcy. We aren't familiar enough for last names, but after this, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, we need to go back to that day if we're going to continue. I hopped on my green bike with the banana seat, the one with the metallic paint that made it shine and shimmer like those flies you'd always see in the summer on piles of dog poop at the park. But today there was no sun to make my baby pretty. Just cold gray clouds and plenty of rain. A real bummer, I thought, as I inserted the ace card in my spokes. Oh, that? We all did it. I don't know why. Some said it made our bikes make noises like a motorcycle, but I always thought it was a load of garbage. It was a trend, so we all jumped on it and did it. And that was that. Plain and simple. And far be it from yours truly to buck a trend. So I jumped on my green machine and began pedaling on into what turned out to be a pretty solid rainstorm. Not uncommon for upstate New York in June, but you're not here for the weather report, I'd wager. On and on I pedaled. Why? Well, Billy McIntosh had claimed that Rocco's Gas & Go accidentally received a rare arcade cabinet, and that was my thing. Video games. Now, this being 1982, and this being a sleepy, backwards mountain town, it was a big deal for us kids when some pizza parlor or supermarket got themselves a new game. But for a gas station to get that game whispered about in middle school cafeterias and under bleachers. Wait, did I mention my mono? I got mono that kept me in bed from mid-April to late May thanks to an experimental French kiss I gave Sammy Finkelman behind the bleachers during third period PE. You can imagine that by June I was more than ready to stretch my legs and venture out, my first real excursion since April, before Sammy gave me his rather substantial cooties. After checking in on Mage, that's my grandmother by the way, she watches me in the summer while my parents do the 9-to-5 deal, which proved to be unnecessary as the combo of her cough medicine and her stories had sent her into a deep slumber on our overstuffed Davenport. I headed out the front door. So card, bike, rain. I wheeled up to Rocco's completely soaked, but undaunted to see if what I'd been told by my 8th grade cabal was actually true. And then I saw it. It practically glowed neon hot as I threw down my kickstand and dragged my soggy bottom from the seat of my bike. Now, my shorts hanging heavy from the quarters in my pocket, coupled with the drenching rain that just wouldn't give me a break. I stood under the rafters of the covered porch that surrounded Rocco's. Before I get to the juicy bits, let me get some basics about the game out of the way. The cabinet was called Ophiuchus, and it was supposedly some unholy combination of Space Invaders and a tarot deck. Also, it didn't display any manufacturing info. No Williams, no Bally, Midway, no Namco, no nothing. While that was odd enough, the rumors from the underground game zines and schoolyard scuttlebutt painted this thing out to be some sort of government-sponsored training device created to determine who among the world's citizens would be the best recruited to fight some sort of evil alien invasion. But come on, that's just the jazz you throw on something to get quarters in the slots. In truth, I suspected this was merely a new game being tested anonymously by one of the big boys who left their name off in case the game was a steaming pile. In an act of willpower I can't believe I could perform, I walked past that machine, its cabinet decorated with a vinyl silk-screened image of a Victorian seance, all Ouija boards and crystal balls, but the image being revealed by the psychic was of an alien firing a flintlock laser gun, and a mummy of all things loomed in the background. I chuckled at that one as I opened the screen door flapping weakly in the light breeze, kicked up by the rainstorm, a storm that now made the air ripe with the barf-inducing scent of displaced earthworms. Yo, Rocco, I came to check out the new game, my man. No answer. Maybe he stepped out for lunch or something. I mean, this isn't the town where you need to lock anything up. Everyone is everyone's shirt-tail relative, and no one would touch a thing. The honor system is alive and well here. Speaking of which, I grabbed one of those fruit pies the superheroes are always hawking in the comic books and a root beer, chucked some random coins on the counter, and strolled back to that most holy of holy grails. I took a moist quarter from my pocket, and I let the quarter slot take it away. I heard it land in the machine's cash box, and it sounds as if I'm the first one to actually play Ophiuchus. Damn it! I forgot to check out the attract screen. Oh well. You know the drill. Black screen, blocky white text, and the barest whisper of a story to fire our imaginations as we stare into the old cathode ray tube. And this one was a doozy. As far as I can recall, it went like this. In 1899, on the eve of a new century, a group of friends gather at the Victorian mansion of Edgar Winchell, iron magnate and devotee to the paranormal. As the clock struck midnight, Edgar and his guests discovered through divination, that means using magic to see crap. Okay, that last bit was me, in case anyone reading this doesn't know what that $10 word is. Anyway, the story continued. Discovered through divination that there was a hidden sign of the zodiac, Ophiuchus, the 13th sign. At that point, a zodiac wheel flashed on the screen. The graphics were impressive, too. This may be a blast after all. The story started up again as the screen faded to black. But their findings were a two-way street, and those that lived in the mystery constellation discovered us that night as well. White light pulsed as the speakers crackled forth their best approximation of thunder. Okay, I admit it. I jumped. When that business end of the screen showed an image of what I assumed to be Edgar looking in his crystal ball, man, these graphics, again, you get my undying adoration, whoever you are that made this thing. Suddenly, an alien hand exploded from the crystal ball and grabbed Edgar's face as the speakers unleashed an approximation of a human scream. Now that I had seen before, or heard would be more accurate, I guess. Wizard of War had a speech synthesizer, and that game was like 2 years old already. Next image was of his guests surrounding a sarcophagus, like right out of ancient Egypt and stuff. Then the scene changed to a rendition of the guests unwrapping a mummy. I don't know what's going on, but it's definitely rad. The screen goes black again, and the speakers come alive. We must free him! Our blood is the way! Animated blood drops hit the black background as the speakers play a sample of a rainstorm. I'm calling it. This is the game of the year. Maybe the entire decade, and I haven't even actually played it yet. A face formed pixel by pixel from the darkness. It was like the face of an angel, but metallic. Its eyes were hidden behind two red glass domes, and a single metallic horn jutted forth from the helmet that covered nearly its entire head. The closest I could tell you to imagine would be the Jet Jaguar robot from Godzilla vs. Megalon that played on WWOR every Thanksgiving, but the face was more like a robot human wearing a fancy motorcycle helmet rather than a sleep robot like old Jolton Jet. The background began pulsing. Black, blue, red, white, black, blue, red, white, as the speakers crackled. Henshin! Cyborg Othello Pharaoh Ace! Blasted the cabinet. Then this insane theme played, and although the words sounded garbled, I believe it went like this. Ancient hero from the sky, do your best, give it a try. Your destiny is here, arise and bring fear to the devil from beyond space. Cyborg Othello Pharaoh Ace. What the fudge? Then it all went black again. I took a bite of fruit pie, resulting in a perfectly square piece of goop-covered apple to fall on the cabinet. The sugary mess caramelized as it hit just left of the joystick. I hope this thing doesn't ignite before I get to play. It was at that point that I grabbed the joystick and readied myself for the game to get underway. A representation of our cyborg hero appeared on screen as various aliens, mostly based on marine life, began forming a phalanx that steadily descended down the screen. Space invaders, with a twist. Very, very cool indeed. But then, everything was flipped upside down. The aliens broke ranks and began marching around Othello as the game then appeared to be a Robotron 2084 clone, which is a good thing because that was one of the best games out this year. First thing I noticed is that the controls would take a bit to get used to. You see, in Robotron, the left joystick controls movement while the right controls the direction you fire. Here, there was a more standard setup. Joystick to move, button to fire, and your lasers went in whatever direction you faced. A few alien casualties in, and it actually felt intuitive. So far, so good. I honestly have no idea how long I played on that quarter. Long enough for the rain to stop and start again. Long enough to finish that fruit pie. And long enough for the sun to begin to set. At some point, I thought it was mega weird that Rocco never came back, but a new wave of attackers pushed that. And all other thoughts from my mind. Only this war mattered. I played through the night. I couldn't stop. Not during the foggy morning or the endlessly rainy afternoon. Then the sun was going down again. In a brief flash of clear thinking, I wondered again about Rocco. And why had no one come looking for me when I hadn't returned home? Then the next wave came. Sequence 17665. Does this game have an end? Or at least some sort of kill screen? I was closer to getting my answer than I thought. Sequence 18666 was just about to begin when the screen exploded in pixel vomit. I think I killed the game. That's when I got that sharp pain in my palm. I removed my hand from the joystick and it came loose with a long shlick sound. My hand was bleeding, and I looked at the joystick just in time to see a needle slip back inside the black ball atop the controls. A ball I had just noticed was decorated with a candy apple red upside-down pentagram. Those things were all over the news. Parents concerned a board game was making their children into Satan's servants. Crapola through and through. Anyway, I couldn't possibly have played that game that long. Maybe that's why no one's name was on it. Maybe it makes kids hallucinate or something. That would definitely require more playtesting to keep Mothers of America from having a collected conniption. I looked into the screen, but it had gone black. That's when I saw Rocco walking up behind me. It had probably only been like 5 minutes after all. Rocco looked confused, maybe? Or was it sad? Anyhow, I turned to face him, but he looked strange, like an image off TV filled with static. Darcy, I can barely see you. Rocco reached forth a static-filled hand, and it went right through my shoulder, causing Rocco to explode in a shower of pixels? Okay, now this game is making me psycho. The speakers shook me from my shock. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and auld lang syne? Happy New Year's, I guess. It was then that I realized that when the song ended, a sample of church bells had started, and as the sound slowly faded in the speakers, the sound of bells grew louder and louder behind me. But there wasn't a church with bells like that in this county, or the next one over for that matter. I turned around, and that's when someone grabbed me and dragged me back. And while you'd think I'd collide with the cabinet, I didn't. I did, however, find myself lying in a hallway of sorts. The hall was comprised of a fleshy living material with circuit boards, tubes, wires, and other electronic business connected to it. I walked on and I reached a pair of thick organic curtains that parted so I could stroll through, which, to be honest, was all I could do. I stepped forward and found myself on a small rocky planet, maybe the size of a couple of houses smushed together. The sky was a brilliant combination of multicolored stars blinking like Christmas tree lights, adrift in a puddle of cotton candy puke, all swirling primary colors punctuated by spots of inky black outer space. Somehow I could still breathe, and I stayed on the planet as I walked, so gravity was some sort of thing here. I walked on and came to a large rock on top of which sat Cyborg Othello Pharaoh Ace, strumming an electric guitar which he had plugged into himself via a port near his left shoulder. The sound seemed to be amplified and spread by his helmet. Smoke swirled around his head as he played a really rad solo, all arpeggios and finger gymnastics. As I came around to the front of him, I noticed a large hand-rolled cigarette dangling from his metallic lips. a grody habit, but hey, Darcy Reed isn't one to tell I don't know quite what he is, but he was older and probably dangerous. And hey, I told you my last name. What do you know? He finished his solo, knocked a huge ash from his cancer stick, and looked at me with those red plastic bug eyes of his. Hey, kid, I'm Cyborg Othello Pharaoh Ace. I finished his sentence with a tone I hoped seemed confident and not like I was going insane, which I was now positive had happened in no uncertain terms. Yup. And you? I'm Darcy Reed of Earth. He chuckled lightly and flicked his cigarette away, which, contrary to logic, drifted skyward. It floated farther and farther away before its cherry end became a distant red star. So, Darcy Reed of Earth, you like video games, yeah? I do. I particularly enjoyed yours, minus some of the kind of gnarly hallucinations. Hallucinations? Yeah, it seemed like I came unstuck in time. Oh, that's because you did. When are you from again? Well, it's 1982, currently. He seemed to contemplate that for a minute. I died Saturday the 26th of April, 1986, in Pripyat. Died? Yeah, I'm a ghost, or will be. Time kind of means nothing, and when you are clued into that, everything becomes one long day. Look, let me break it down for you. The unicorn unit, the thing that makes me change, was sent to Earth centuries ago in order to be a preventative method against the Daganites. That's those fishy fellows you battled in the game. Anyway, 2686 BC, the Daganites showed their faces in ancient Egypt. I melded with a pharaoh, defeated the invasion, then went into slumber until Edgar's social club woke me up when they noticed Ophiuchus, home to the Daganites, and Professor Flickhead, creator of the unicorn unit. I managed to meld with the young socialite, Mildred Duchamp, and defeated the New Year's Eve invasion of 1899. This is all a bit much. I just wanted to play a new game and eat some empty calories, dude. Well, it gets much from here on, I'm afraid. Okay, just pull the bandage off. The next invasion happened in your future. In 1986, Daganites decided that they needed to distract the world, and me, from their latest invasion attempt with some kind of disaster. And they blew up a reactor in the Ukraine. I melded with a secretary from the steno pool, and I lost. You lost? Yep, I lost. The Daganites infiltrated the Russian government, and the whole thing was chalked up to negligence. And then the professor had a great idea. A contest of sorts to determine who could wield the unit successfully, sent back in time through an unstable, virtually unusable portal to prevent what happens in 1986. Ophiuchus? Ophiuchus, a modern sword in the stone, and you won. So what happens next? That's up to you. This is all a bit heavy for a 12-year-old girl. Actually, I believe that's crap. You do? I do. A female, not a child, not yet a woman. There's a lot of powerful, angry energy there. Well, you may be right, but on the other hand, I just want to eat junk food and play video games. Fair enough, Darcy Reed of Earth. Just let me think on it. I need my happy place, I'd wager. Couldn't hurt. I closed my eyes, tight. When I opened them, I was in my bedroom, lying in bed with a well-read Star Wars comic on my chest. I rolled over and discovered I'd spilled an entire package of Reese's Pieces on my bed. I shrugged, popped a few of the candies in my mouth, and went to turn on my Atari. It was then that I saw my hand was encased in a kind of shiny black leather material. Oh, right. The walls of my room collapsed, and I remembered where I was. Ritlai, the Dagonite homeworld. I'd gone to my happy place again to help ground myself for the upcoming fight. It always seemed to help keep my mind clear in battle. I touched a nearby invisible button on my helmet, and my words blasted forth, amplified and made to sound like the voice of an angry god. I have arisen to bring fear to the devil from beyond space. The Dagonites before me trembled a bit at that, but drew their weapons all the same. I am Cyborg Othello Pharaoh Ace.
Ghost Story by A.N. Ominous. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was young. I was young enough to taste the adventure, but old enough to know better. I'm still not sure how this was real. Too much happened and was seen to be the fanciful imagination of being young. One thing is for certain. I have not forgotten what happened that night. And I am certain I never will. It was fall. The leaves were just starting to turn. The days were still warm and the nights were getting cooler. The county fair had been in full swing and was the last night it was open. I was there because a friend had talked me into going, and I wanted to sample some kettle corn and caramel apples there. I was waiting in line for the popcorn when we saw him. He was a boy about my age and my size. He looked like any other boy there, except his clothes were funny. He looked like he was dressed up in old-time movie clothes. He was looking at us. My friend nudged me and nodded in his direction. We exchanged looks and began to walk toward him. As we began to walk, to my surprise, so did he, directly for us, without looking away. When we were within speaking distance, I nodded and said, "Hey." He nodded back and said, "Hello, my name is Jonathan. I'm from here, but have been elsewhere for a while. I don't know anyone here now." I told him he could go with us if he wanted to. He nodded. We spent the next couple of hours riding the roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, and the tilt-a-whirl, after which I thought I might hurl, but I managed to keep things together. We had found a bench to sit. Jonathan and my friend were working on some red vines when he asked if we liked scary things. We looked at each other and said, "Of course," as if we would reply any other way. He asked if we knew where the house was, down on Oak Street. He said he knew the house that was spooky down there. I was hesitant, but after some encouragement from Jack, we were soon headed out the gates from the fair, into the night. As we made our way down through some neighborhood streets, it had really began to cool off, and there was definitely a chill in the air. A breeze was picking up, and a few leaves were blowing in between our feet as we walked. We were beginning to get far enough away from the fair now that I began to become uncomfortable with the distance, even though I knew where we were. It was just then when he said, "We're here." This had startled me as I realized we had all been walking in silence. A glance from Jack told me he was no more at ease than I was. I had this strange feeling of foreboding, and in retrospect, I know now that my survival instinct was trying to warn me. As I looked at him, he stood looking up at it. The house was huge. I can't believe I had never noticed it before. It was a sprawling 3-story mansion with what appeared to have been a large yard all around it. It seemed to be well kept, but everything about it repelled me. I looked at Jack and the other boy. Jack was looking around nervously. The boy, though, he had a radiant smile on his face. I noted he was actually breathing hard. I asked him if he was all right. He snapped his head towards me instantly while taking a step toward me. "Yes," he said, then slowly retreated one step back again. "What do you think?" he asked. Jack was barely audible when he answered. "I don't think we should go in if that's what you mean." "Of course we should go in. I know who lives here. They aren't there yet," he said. I agreed with Jack and voiced my concern with getting into trouble. "There will be no trouble. Let's just go," the boy said, and with that, he began to walk up the walkway to the front door. I thought the walk to that front door was the longest 25 feet of my life. Every step forward seemed to get colder. The darkness enveloped us, and the air seemed to become still. The repulsion I felt going forward was immense and progressive. I didn't know why I felt like this. I didn't want to seem scared, but I was, and I didn't know why, which made me confused on top of the anxiety I seemed to be becoming overwhelmed with. I was following the new friend of ours and Jack. The boy seemed to be bursting with enthusiasm and excitement as Jack and I trudged along. As we approached the steps up, I took hold of the rail and realized my palms were sweating profusely. I became aware of my own labored breathing. I looked to Jack, who mouthed, "No," at me as we were almost to the top step on the porch. My mouth was dry as I thought of 100 reasons not to open the large front door, but couldn't utter a single word. The boy stood in front of the door and turned to look at me. He simultaneously reached for the knob and turned it. I yelled, "No!" as he did, but to no avail, as we heard the click and the door began to swing open. The door creaked and groaned in a way that sounded guttural as he swung it open wide. I could see inside into the middle of the room, but the darkness swallowed the perimeter beyond. "Come in," was all he said as he boldly stepped in without looking back. Without a word, Jack and I followed him in. The smell was overwhelming as we stepped inside. It smelled musty, earthy, and almost rotten, like a trunk that had been closed for years. I thought the windows looked broken out in places, but there was no air moving through the house now. I don't remember the door shutting, but I felt the uncontrollable urge to run, and I backed right into the shut door. Jack, in a panic, grabbed the handle and wrenched on it, but it didn't budge. He pulled with increased fervor, and I began to hit the door with my closed fist, and my hands began to tingle. I swung around to see the boy standing, looking at us, expressionless. A smile began to creep into the corners of his mouth. This twistedly sick look he began to have made the terror well up even more. As I began to scream at him, he suddenly turned and ran into the darkness, laughing maniacally. I followed a few steps after him instinctively until I realized that, giggling, he ran down the stairs. Down the stairs seemed to be even blacker than the darkness that already left navigating nearly impossible. I turned to look at Jack, who was gone. I cried out in fear and frustration at our stupidity. Why would you ever go somewhere with someone you don't know? Yet here I am. Jack stepped forward into my field of vision and grabbed my arm. He began to sob. "What's going on? Where did he go? Why is this place so scary? What's going on?" I pulled him in and put my arm around his shoulder. "Look at me. We are going to get out of here," I said in as calm of a voice as I could muster. I looked to the side to a window and ran to it. I ripped the floor-length velvet curtains open and gasped to see a window. I looked next to me to see a small table and picked it up and banged it on the glass. I wasn't sure what was going on yet, but I wasn't fully committed to breaking out a window because I'm scared. This could be a prank done on poor taste. Fear overwhelmed my rational thoughts, and I swung it. It didn't budge, and I felt as though I were hitting stone. I was even more scared at this abnormal response. I backed up one step and swung as hard as I could to have the table splinter apart, with pieces smashing against the walls, floor, and into my head. I felt the point of impact to reveal on my head a spot of blood on my hand. The window appeared unblemished. As I frantically turned to see Jack crumple into a pile on the floor crying, "I want to go home." I grabbed his collar and pulled him to his feet. I went into the first open door I saw aside from the staircase. "That boy must be in on this. I don't know why he would bring us here, but you can be sure it's not good," I whispered as I pulled Jack along, who was now regaining his composure. The doorway opened into a large room. It appeared to be a library, as books lined the walls to high windows which must have been 3 stories tall, as there were balconies with ladders circumnavigating the room. I pulled us to one side as it seemed to offer a mirage of protection versus being in the room's center. I put a hand against the shelf and looked at the books. Most of the titles were in languages I didn't even recognize, some with what appeared to be symbols only. Breathing hard and looking around for the next move, I noticed there were mounted heads of animals surrounding the room. They were high above the books on the walls. Deer, bear, cougar. They did not have content looks on their faces, rather anger or fear. I looked to the next and found the animal to be beyond description. I stared at its cavorted face and studied it for a moment. It was unknown to me. I glanced ahead and found another unrecognizable head. Upon closer look, I gasped and nearly threw up. It was the head of what looked to be a person, but it had hair all over its face. Its simian likeness was unmistakable, yet it seemed more human. Jack was gasping at me, looking wildly in the direction I had been staring, yelling, "What is it?" He pulled at me to follow him, and I stumbled along. We came to a hallway with opposing doors. At the far end was a door with windows on either side. Long velvet curtains hung parted in the middle, showing the moonlight peeking through. We took pensive steps towards the first door, and I reached out to turn the knob. I cautiously edged the door open and peeked inside. It was too dark to make anything out visually, but I heard sounds. It sounded like some kind of animal was stepping in something wet and sludge-like. Grunting and labored breaths intermixed with ripping sounds came from somewhere within the room. A barely audible whimper was immediately stopped by a low growl. It was then Jack stepped back, and a squeak of the floorboard suddenly alerted whatever was in there. There was a rustling of something moving toward us, and I knew beyond any doubt that I did not want to know what was making that noise. I was able to get us out and slam the door before the thing could get there. Jack was whispering how badly he wanted to leave and clutching my arm in a near frantic manner. I was unsure if we should look in any more rooms or go try to escape from one of the windows at the end of the hall. As I was gathering my wits, I heard another moan. I thought it might have been my imagination, but Jack's face registered that he had heard it as well. "Was that the other boy?" he asked in a whisper. "I don't know," I replied as my voice broke. I had never and have not since known fear such as this. Sweat dripped off my nose, running down my neck and back. I was shaking and could barely speak. I had thrown up again after shutting that door. It just hadn't registered until now. I wiped at my face, and it was apparent I had not been aware enough to make any attempt to project it away from my body. I had a sudden recall that I had my cell phone. Funny how I had argued how I wanted and needed one with my parents and used the safety reason. How ironic, I thought, as I frantically dug it from my pocket. No service. As I thought my spirit couldn't drop farther, the date under the Times seemed to be spinning, like a dial. I had no idea what had happened, but the realization it was broken almost made me cry. If we made it out of there, my parents would kill me for breaking it. I was truly terrified as the tears began to run down my cheeks. I was breathing fast and hard. My head was spinning like I may pass out. Jack's sudden grip on my arm again brought my attention back to reality. We must have been moving the last few moments as we were standing in front of the next door, which, unfortunately, was open. There was a shaft of moonlight coming from the window across the room, and it fell on two of the dirtiest, foulest dogs I had ever seen. My mouth fell open in utter shock at the putrescence of them. They seemed to have what looked like some rotting skin in places. One looked like it was partially disemboweled and something drug on the floor a short distance behind it. The first one lowered his head with a growl, and saliva, or something like it, dripped from the large fangs. It momentarily glistened in the little light present. The smell coming from them was nauseating. Sickly sweet rotting stench with sulphur-esque tones burned my nose as I immediately recoiled from sight and smell. The closer animal, if you could call it that, began to growl, although the sound seemed to emanate from the hole in its side. I pushed Jack ahead of me as panic again rose in me like a wave commanding me to run. In spite of the pathetic creature's aberrant appearance, they could move quickly. Their claws dug to gain purchase on the old floor, shredding with each foot strike. There were snarling, jaws snapping, making saliva fling and spray in the moonlight. Our complete terror must have been adrenaline-fueled enough, as they were nearly to the end of the hall before I realized it. There was a perpendicular hall at the end by the windows, and as Jack was slowing to make a turn, I heard the hounds had stopped or slowed. I turned to look, and they had stopped 20 feet back and were crouching down with tails tucked between their legs, whining, and were turning back as though they were afraid of something. I called to Jack as quietly as possible to get his attention without drawing further alert to our presence. We were stopped by the windows, and I looked out. My parents were walking down the street. My heart soared as I hit the window, screaming their names, completely throwing caution to the wind. They couldn't hear, and kept going as there was no way for them to know I was here. I was supposed to be at the fair. How sorry I was that I hadn't done as I had said. I was going to die in this house. I didn't know what this place was, but it was so much worse than anything I had conjured up as a haunted house in my head. I would have given anything to be with my parents right now. Safe. Not here in this terrible place, whatever this was. I looked down the hall, and at the far end was what looked like an old servant staircase, narrow and steep going down. Wanting to go anywhere but down, I looked the other way and saw a door at the far end, and doors on opposing sides down the hall. More doors made fear well up inside me again. The hair began to stand up on my neck. There was a faint crying sound that was slowly growing louder. Was it a child? A woman? Was it the boy? I couldn't tell, but as it grew louder and louder, it became more distorted. It was a mixture of crying that was morphing from a cry to laughter with choking intermixed. I had never heard a sound like that before, and if I never do again, it would be a blessing. My fear was already overcoming me, and this wretched cacophony was more than I could take. I began to pull Jack to follow me, and we began to run. We sprinted into the hallway blindly in terror. I frantically grabbed at doorknobs to open one, any one of them, in hopes to get refuge from this horror. The light was so low I could barely make out the shapes of the doors. The illumination was minimal, and the color of the walls and doors appeared to be various shades of black. I scraped and patted around what I thought was a door and scrambled along. As I jabbed and reached, as I searched, I felt my fingertip catch on something sharp, and my skin hooked on to whatever nail or splinter protruded. I felt the warm fluid spread and drip. As I felt the casing for the knob, I felt my fingernail pull off entirely. In my nearly crazed search for a way out, the dark hall seemed to lighten slightly. The sound was still screeching, crying, laughter constantly, escalating to the point I thought my ears might burst. I felt Jack hitting at me and looked where he was staring. Coming down the hall was something I think no mortal man was meant to see. It was distorted and terrible, flowing with a jerking quality simultaneously. I was suddenly captivated at the indescribable sight approaching. It was sinister, abhorrent, and mesmerizing. I knew if it reached us, all was lost. My hand found the knob that was freezing cold. I turned it. As we fell back with the door opening, I turned quickly to survey and found we were trapped in a closet. In a completely reactionary measure, I slammed the door just as the specter reached us. It roared with an intensity that seemed impossible. It slammed into the door with such violence that shards of wood, dust, and material blew out of the wall, spraying down on us. For an unknown but seemingly endless time, the torrent of anger and pure rage continued to pound upon the door, and I do not know how it did not breach it. At some point it stopped, If possible, the sudden silence was even more deafening. Jack continued to lay on the floor next to me as I lay curled in the fetal position. After an indeterminate amount of time, I began to notice a light coming from under the door. I thought it looked like sunlight. I moved over and tried to peer under. I could see what looked like daylight on the old red carpet. I looked and listened and could perceive nothing outside the door. I reached up and turned the knob. With a creak that was the defining noise of every haunted house ever, the door opened. The hallway was lit with the earliest rays of the beautiful morning sun. It was such a welcome sight to the soul-sucking pitch black of the previous night. As I took in the sunshine, movement in the hall caught my attention, and I recoiled back. The sunlight was just peeking over the horizon through the windows, leaving shadows in between each one. The far end of the hallway was bathed in darkness to the door and beyond. The terrible apparition was hovering just at this boundary of light and dark. It was almost too much for my mind, and I thought I might pass out. It screamed and raged against this boundary, seething and pacing back and forth. It seemed to strain with all its will until the last bit of darkness was abolished with the wonderful sunlight. There was an implosion of sound with some sort of vapor or smoke, and when it dissipated, there was a single sheet with 2 eye holes cut out, perched at the end of the hall where it had been. It seemed almost comical, a cruel and mocking reminder that it was not gone, not truly. We eventually came to the realization that we were able to escape the house only after we passed by the classic ghost. I felt taunted and bullied by it. I wanted to knock it over, but was so repelled by it, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I didn't and don't know what was under the sheet. We made our way through the house. There was no resistance. Windows were broken out, exterior doors left open, absent in some places. As we exited the house, we saw a passing police car and waved it down. The officer listened to both of us trying to relay the story, and he became suddenly very excited when he heard our names. We fell silent as he told us that we had been reported missing 6 days ago, and the entire town had been searching for us. Come to find out, the authorities had actually presumed us dead. My parents were out looking for me when I had seen them. My head beginning to spin was the last thing I remember that day. I'm not sure how many people believed us, if anyone. Jack and I drifted apart as I think both of us couldn't bear the memories of that night. Although thankfully, I have never had another experience such as this. I will never forget that ghost stories aren't always fun.
Old Jerry by R.T. Raynaud. Great. Another broken blade. Goddamn Sawzall. This Japanese piece of shit just isn't built for hard work. Or is it Chinese? I don't know. It's one of those Oriental countries. I mean, if you're using it in an air-conditioned, perfectly ventilated workshop a month after you bought it, and all you're cutting is 5/8-inch plywood, it'll work great. But I swear, the moment you take it outside, or it gets dirty, or what you're cutting is a little messy, you spend more time on saw repair than you do actually sawing. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. I'm pretty sure that bone isn't something the saw was designed to cut. No, fuck that. This thing is designed to cut through aluminum. Bone shouldn't be a problem. I should have just paid a little extra for an American-made one. Fucker, fine. There, new blade. You happy, saw? Can we please finish this before sunrise? I still have a hole to dig. Relax, Jerry. Breathe. Just a little bit more work and you'll never have to see this kid's smug little fucking face again. At least he'll never egg your house again on Halloween. I bet this was the little shit who's been doing it every year. Without fail, each November 1st is spent cleaning rotting egg off of my stucco, or toilet paper out of my tree, or a smashed pumpkin off of my porch. I have been vowing for years to catch the fuckface who kept doing it. And I did, didn't I, you little bastard? You thought that you could get away with it again this year, huh? You thought, well, I'm just gonna pick on old Jerry, just minding his own business. You didn't count on the fact that I was watching this year, that I saw your little devil costume throwing that egg with your friends Dracula, Zombie, and Skeleton cheering you on, that I would recognize your stupid little costume when you walked up to my door alone, asking for candy. Kind of a bonehead move when you think about it. Everyone knows that when you're trick-or-treating, you walk up to the door, knock, ask for candy, get candy, and go on to the next house. It's called trick-or-treating for a reason, you know. It's in the disjunctive. You do one or the other, not both. That would be trick and treating, moron. Even if it wasn't just plain illogical, if you're going to do both, you should do the trick after you've already gotten the candy. Duh. And you're never supposed to go into the person's house, particularly when you don't know them. Particularly if you've already egged the house because you're a cock-sucking asshole kid with no sense of decency. Particularly when you've been fucking with old Jerry for years already. You weren't the sharpest crayon in the box, were you, Chief? Oh shit. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You'd think a saw could cut through some viscera without getting all jammed up, but no! Ugh. Blood's all over the place now. Fuck, it's in my goddamn eye. Hold on, this shit stings. Even in death, you're giving me crap. Alright, it's settled. I need a new saw. When this is all over, I'm gonna dump this fucker in the hole with you, bud. You know, honestly, I wasn't expecting the welcome to my haunted house line to work. Most kids probably would have politely declined. It was the obvious play. Admittedly, I hadn't expected you to have the balls to actually walk up to my house. I didn't have the time to think of a really creative way to lure you in. I was in the middle of cursing myself for my unpreparedness when you said, "Thanks, mister," and waltzed through my front door like you owned the fucking place. You fell for my ruse hook, line, and sinker, complete with stupid smile across your chubby idiot face. I had such a hard time restraining my joy as I marched you through the house, towards the kitchen. I probably could have done without that snide comment you made about how my home looked more like a haunted crack house. Yeah, I get it. I live by myself, and I wasn't expecting guests. It's as clean as I mind it, but it probably couldn't hurt to dust and mop more regularly. Now that I'm reflecting on it, the condition of my house probably helped sell the half-baked scheme in the first place. But who the fuck are you anyway? You're just some idiot kid. What the hell do you know about interior decoration? You probably have a fucking video game poster on the wall in your room. Classless fucking asshole. And the comment about the insects on the dishes in the kitchen sink. Apparently you're too good to eat bugs. I mean, it's food that walks right up to you. You'll eat whatever the hell nougat is, but if it has a thorax, all of a sudden it's too gross for you. Bourgeois bitch. I swear some people have no vision. But you know what I regret? I regret not having a video camera set up to capture your face when you turned to me and said, "This is a pretty lame haunted house." You were expecting to see me disappointed at the bad review. I could see it in your eyes, in your shit-eating grin. You wanted to ruin my night, to inflict psychic torment on who you thought was a poor, earnest haunted house proprietor with your dissatisfied customer routine. I mean, I know it was just a ploy to get you in the house, but I was offering you a free haunted house tour, gratis. As far as you knew, it would cost you nothing. Despite this, nothing would have given you more pleasure than to see old Jerry's feelings hurt. It's just sadistic when you think about it. You relished the opportunity to be an asshole, right up until the moment I cracked you in the forehead with the hammer you never noticed me holding. If we're being entirely honest, I hit you too hard. I wanted you to know what was happening. before I turned your lights out. I wasn't going for a scream of terror or anything like that, but if I had my druthers, no, please stop, would have been nice to hear you say before the end. To be fair, blunt force head trauma is more of an art than a science, and it's not like I do this very often. To kids your age, anyway. As was, you dropped limp without a sound, but ooh boy, it was still pretty sweet. I'm getting chills just thinking about it again. I knew I had to hit you again to make sure the deed was done, if only to make sure you couldn't surprise me and get away when I turned my back. I've been down this road too many times to not know that one should never underestimate the resiliency of the human body. Afterwards, I dragged you over to the basement door and pushed you down the stairs. There was no way for you to somehow magically escape from down there. I suppose I may have been being too cautious, but these are the kinds of lessons experience teaches you, I suppose. That's the difference between old Jerry and other people. I like redundancies, but my worries were needless. You landed at the bottom with a dull flop, eyes open and dilated. You were clearly dead. Your blood droplets splattered all over my basement stairwell. Oh, remind me later to get to the pharmacy to pick up some hydrogen peroxide to clean all this up. Then came step 2 of my plan. I cut you up into little pieces so that I could properly dispose of you. I mean, of course I kept the tastiest parts of you for dinner this week. But my refrigerator is only so large. Eventually, the rest of you'd start stinking. Eventually, the smell would draw notice. Best just to dump you in a shallow grave and be done with you. I had just been hoping that the disposal part of this process hadn't been so taxing. If only this saw would cooperate. I mean, look at me. I'm covered in your blood. Old Jerry looks like he's been, well, like he's been in a basement, cutting up a body all night. No? Well, I thought it was funny. Being splattered with your blood does make for a pretty convincing Halloween costume, at least. When all's said and done, kiddo, you're actually pretty easy to talk to. Don't get me wrong. I still think you're a prick, but I haven't had this much human interaction in months. Ever since that psychologist lady told me to stop coming by. Man, now that is a story. You see, the court ordered me to see a shrink a couple of times a week, but one week she forgot to give me my prescription. I ran out over the weekend, but her office didn't open until Monday. So I did some researching to find where she lived and went to her house. Shh. Do you hear something? I think I just heard a knock on the front door. Hold on. Let me go see. Hey, wouldn't you know, your friends Dracula, Zombie, and Skeleton are here. They look a little worried, perhaps here to check on you. Now I see why you were so bold in coming up to my house. This was all just some bit. You must have thought your friends had your back if anything went wrong. Maybe you should have stuck with the plan and only asked for candy. Who's the joke on now, bitch? They sure did take their time coming to your rescue, didn't they? No doubt the product of an extended debate about whether to go tell someone and risk getting in trouble for tonight's hijinks. I really have to question your friend's wisdom in approaching the same house you didn't come out of. You really picked some idiot friends. Seriously, what the hell are they teaching you kids about the mechanics of trick-or-treating these days? Like I said, go up to the house, get candy, leave, approach next house, repeat. None of this is rocket science. But I suppose they still are witnesses who can link you back to me, and I really don't want the police sniffing around here. Way too much for them to find. Hoo-wee! They'd bury old Jerry under the jail if they found half the shit I have down here. A few too many skeletons in the closet, and in the crawl space, and under the floorboards, and in the backyard. Do you think they'll fall for the same haunted house ruse you did? I mean, you did give me a great costume. How's about it, Hoss? You in the mood for some company? Yeah? Well, then we're agreed. Let me go get my hammer. Oh, fuck. The goddamn saw. How the hell am I going to cut up 3 more of you with this thing? Careful What You Wish by David O'Hanlon. Penn reached for the doorbell. His finger hovered over the button as it had the last 2 times he tried to bring himself to ring. He sighed and jabbed the button. Ed's face pressed against the glass of the nearest window. Penn chuckled at the sight of the freckled, buck-toothed face, smiling excitedly at him. The door opened, and Penn was greeted by a far less enthusiastic individual. Penn shifted uncomfortably. He didn't look like an ex-con in his new jeans and custom polo shirt, but he felt the same way he did every time he was pulled in for a police lineup. Ed's mother, Janet, held an obese chocolate point Siamese cat against her chest and stroked it like a movie villain while she eyed the man on her doorstep. Janet slipped her robe up over her shoulder and raised an eyebrow. "You're Ed's friend?" Penn shifted the brown paper bag into his left hand and extended the right. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Penn." "And you've been in a few too, would be my guess." She waved him inside. "You're gonna let the other cats out." Penn stepped inside and glanced around the restored brownstone. 3 tabbies lounged on the furniture. A Maine Coon lifted its head from the arm of the recliner to survey a new arrival to its domain. The cat was seemingly unimpressed by Penn and went back to sleep. Penn turned to Janet. Ed had told him his mom used to be a famous model, but the horrible marriage and subsequent vodka and Valium-based diet hid the fact now. Janet looked like she would be bumming smokes outside a 7-Eleven. Penn felt a tinge of guilt. He knew better than anyone not to judge a person by their circumstances. She dumped the Siamese onto the love seat and straightened her pajamas before pulling her robe closed and tying the belt tightly around her slender waist. "Don't you think it's weird hanging out with a 10-year-old boy?" Janet snapped the elastic from her bun and let her brown hair fall as she walked past him and into the kitchen. She grabbed a glass from the dish strainer and banged it onto the countertop. "You're like 30 after all." Penn shrugged. "So are you." "Thanks for rubbing salt in that wound." Janet poured orange juice into a glass and reached for the Popov bottle atop the fridge. "You can have something to drink if you like. Lactose-free milk, sugar-free Kool-Aid, caffeine-free tea. We even have that shitty soda that lacks all of the above. I've got a water bottle in the truck, but thanks." "Cut the shit, Penn." Janet sipped from the bottle before pouring a splash into the juice. "The boy's allergic to everything. No one hangs out with him because they want to. The last date I had was 4 years ago, and Ed broke out in hives because of the guy's cologne. He has to wear a dusk mask to walk through the living room because of the cat hair. The inhaler, the EpiPen, anxiety meds, and Allegra for sinuses, seizures at the movies, motion sickness at the fair, panic attacks at the mall. There's nothing you can do with him. Ed shouldn't even go to the park or wherever it is that he spends his time. What do you really want with him?" Ed sneezed around the corner. Penn wasn't sure where the boy was, but knew he was within earshot. Janet's eyes flicked toward the noise and back to Penn. Calling her son a loser clearly wasn't outside of the norm. Penn's fist tightened, crumpling the paper sack noisily. "Health-wise, there's a lot of things wrong with Ed. Everyone else sees those conditions as things that make him weak. I see them as the reasons he's got such a big goddamn heart." Penn stepped closer to Janet and took the glass from the counter before she could drink it. "They're Ed's conditions. But you're right. They do interfere with your life. You have to take the extra precautions, and I bet that's exhausting." "Don't you patronize me." "I'm not. Honestly, I can't imagine what you've had to sacrifice to protect him, but that doesn't change the fact that Ed doesn't get to be a kid." Penn chugged the screwdriver and scowled at the aftertaste. He cleared his throat. "What I want is to take him for the weekend so he can experience a sleepover, watch cheesy horror flicks, play too many video games, and eat a fuck ton of red and green gummy worms with his friend the way regular kids get to. And you can go to the spa or the mall or on a date or at least to a liquor store for some better vodka." You're one ballsy son of a bitch. Janet huffed and put her hands on her hips. Thank you for noticing, but let's keep this professional. Janet's face slipped into a smile for a brief moment. Then the serious, judgmental glare returned. You want to know what's in it for me? Penn shrugged. Ed's the only person that's ever seen anything good in me. I want to return the favor. I want to give him the experiences he should be having. And as an extra bonus, I'm giving you the weekend off. He's got school Monday. Janet took the glass from Penn and jabbed the rim into his chest. You have him home by 7 Sunday night, or you'll be the one with medical conditions. Woohoo! Ed shouted excitedly from around the corner. Ed climbed into the unmarked moving truck and clicked his seatbelt. Penn handed him the brown paper bag. I don't think your mom likes me, he said. To be fair, Mom doesn't get enough guests to know how to like people at all. Ed uncurled the lip of the bag. What's this? A present, obviously. Presents don't usually come in brown grocery bags, Penn. Ed giggled and pulled out a black polo shirt. Hey, it's like yours. It's exactly like mine, Penn said as he tapped his own embroidered pocket. Ed found the chest pocket was identical and featured a stitched moving truck in green thread and gold letters surrounded it. Ed and Penn Moving Services. Ed reached into the bag once more and pulled out a lunchbox. He opened it and found a bag of gummy worms, a sandwich, 2 juice boxes, and a protein bar. Ed smiled sadly. What's wrong? I'm too weak to help you move things. People have little things to move. Penn tousled Ed's shaggy hair. Besides, you don't get stronger by not trying. I used to be scrawny. Really? Really. And look at me now. Penn flexed, straining the sleeve of his shirt. How do you think I got this strong? Because you had nothing to do but work out when you were in prison? Ed answered, chipperly. That's entirely true and also not my point. Ed pursed his lips. Even if you can't help with the physical part all the time, I'm going to need someone to help me with all the business stuff. They don't teach bookkeeping in the joint, and you have to help me paint the truck. Ed sat up quickly. Any color? Of course. Ready for our first job? Penn held out his fist. Ed bumped knuckles against Penn's hand. Absolutely, partner. Crumbs rolled down Ed's shirt and joined the others in his lap while Penn lugged the mattress up the loading ramp and into the back of the truck. Penn was right, and the couple had lots of little things for Ed to load. Still, he felt bad leaving the heaviest stuff for his friend. He shoved the rest of the sandwich into his mouth. Is there more? He asked between bites. Yeah, but not much. Penn pointed to one wall of the truck. Think you can move those boxes over in front of the dresser? There's a big curio cabinet and 2 footlockers that I think would be more stable there. Sure thing. Dahlia patted Penn's shoulder as he hopped out of the truck and rested her hands on the bumper. You're a good helper. Thanks, Ed said. You have a lot of cool old stuff. Dahlia laughed. Oh, love, this isn't ours. My grandfather was a bit of an adventurer once upon a time. That's so cool. Ed scooped up a box and set it on top of the dresser. So, this is all his treasures? Some of it. After my grandmother passed away, Papa Harp became a hermit and most of it just stayed here, collecting dust. My daddy used to tell me all his stories. I'm sad to say I never got to meet the man myself. That does kind of suck. Kind of. Dahlia tugged at a violet braid and twisted it around her fingers. Not knowing him means I get to hold on to the hope that some of the magic in those stories might actually be real. Oh, magic is very real. Ed smiled knowingly. Where is all this going? I'm sending it all over to a colleague. They're going to sort it out and sell it for me. Why not keep it? Dahlia laughed sweetly. Oh, I'd love to, but there's just too much of it. The hubby and I are moving to New York. We found us a cute little townhouse, the operative word being little. That's too bad. Ed lifted an ornate bottle from one of the boxes. This stuff is really nifty. I'd love to hear the stories about each one. Maybe you will, love. I've got a book deal with a big publisher up north. I'm going to write all about Papa Harp and his adventures. I can't wait to read them. I'll send a signed copy to you and your dad, Dahlia said with a smile. Oh, Penn's not my dad, he's just my best friend. Ed's face soured. By default. Dahlia cocked her head. How's that? He's my only friend, so I guess he has to be the best one. Ed stared at the bottle in his tiny hands. Well, now you've got two, Ed. Dahlia smiled at him. I gotta pack up a couple more boxes that I think would fit perfectly right where you're working. I'll be back in a tick. Ed leaned on the dresser and turned the bottle in his hands, carefully. Raised figures around the vessel were carved from the green glass itself. Ed stepped toward the back of the truck and viewed it in the sun. Nifty! He gasped as the glass changed to brilliant red in the direct sunlight. Figures bound to one another formed an unending chain near the base of the bottle above a silver cap cut to resemble flames that engulfed them. A cutout figure towered over them with a staff in his hand, and the neck of the bottle was shrouded in a silver sleeve with intricate engravings of stars over the man. On the opposite side of the bottle was another figure, bound by a giant snake with a hood over his head. He turned the bottle upside and felt the weight shift, then held it up to light to discover it was empty. He shook it again, feeling the invisible contents bouncing about. No freaking way! He rubbed his thumb over the constricting body of the serpent and tucked the bottle away in its box as he heard the dolly bounce off the front porch. This is so cool! It took another 40 minutes to load the rest of the things and say goodbye to Dahlia and her husband. She got Penn's mailing address to send the book like she said, and tipped both of them in cash for their hard work. They were cruising down the back roads to avoid the rush hour traffic. Ed turned up the radio and bobbed in his seat to Iggy Pop's Butt Town. Penn laughed at the boy and threw up his horns before headbanging along with the music. Ed exploded with laughter. Neither of them was aware of the happenings in the back of the truck. They couldn't hear the glass snake's body fissuring or the tiny pieces falling away from the hooded figure, now free of its reptilian restraints. They couldn't smell the acrid, semi-sweet fumes spilling over the lip of the bottle as the building's smoke forced the cork up. Penn checked the time on the dashboard clock and grunted. "What's wrong?" Ed asked. "I was hoping we'd have all this dropped off before dark so we could go to the park and get those hot dogs you like so much for dinner. If I'd helped more, we might have been done faster." "Don't do that. It's not your fault. It's our first gig. We'll get faster." He shrugged. "Besides, there's a place nearby that has these huge conies with every topping imaginable." "Like?" "They've got one called the Gut Buster where the dog is inside onion rings in a cheese-toasted bun and drowned in chili." "Sweet. I think I'll have 2 of those." They both laughed. "Can we go to the mall?" Ed rubbed Dahlia's $20 tip between his fingers. "Sure. We can do whatever you want, kid." He squeezed Ed's shoulder reassuringly. "But I thought you didn't like the mall." "I'll take an extra anxiety pill." Ed hung his head. "I want to find Mom a perfume I'm not allergic to." Something thumped in the back of the truck. Shit. Penn slapped the steering wheel. I forgot to strap the mattress down. Penn pulled over and unbuckled. Ed's eyes grew wide as he realized the source. "Don't go, Penn. It's not much further." "It'll only take a second, kid." Penn winked and stepped out, skirting the side of the truck in case of passing cars. Ed clambered out of the truck and watched as Penn rolled the door up. Penn sniffed the air and fanned his hand in front of his face. "Why does it smell like a fucking opium den?" he asked no one in particular. The ornate bottle clattered along the metal floor of the truck and rolled off the end. Penn caught it before he could hit the ground. He sighed and held it up for Ed to see. "The mattress must have knocked over a box, probably some old-timey cologne that stinks," he said. "How many years have I been captive?" A set of glowing eyes shined in the darkness. Penn knelt next to Ed. "I thought magic had to have a battery." "What do you think you're holding?" Ed whispered. "What is the price of my emancipation, master?" The thing in the back of the truck's voice was a rumbling hiss like steam through rusted pipes. "What is owed of Babak?" "Master?" Penn looked at the bottle quizzically and snickered. "Is that what I think it is?" "Yes and no," Ed gulped. The speaker came forward. his body adorned in a silk cloak with strands of gold that shimmered in the setting sun. Wrinkled hands curled at the ends of the flowing sleeves before reaching up and pulling the hood away from his face. A sweeping gray mustache covered his entire lip and swept out in grandiose curls. "Do you free me without obligation?" Babbitt asked. "You're a fucking genie!" Penn exclaimed. "An ifrit," Ed corrected. "The master is learned," Babbitt said. "Speak quickly. I have been gone too long." "Not until you grant us 3 wishes, though." "The law of Suleiman binds me to one." Babbitt held up a single finger. "I am free of my glass prison, and now bound only by the hesitation of the master's words." "I've seen enough horror movies to know how this turns out. I wish you were back in the bottle," Penn said. "It was the boy who set me free. He must make the wish." "Wish him back in the bottle, kid. It's not worth the risk." I wish I wasn't a burden," Ed blurted. "Fuck!" Penn waved his hands in the air. "Nope, that doesn't count. He's just a kid. He doesn't know what he's saying." Babbitt twisted one side of his mustache and grinned menacingly. "It is done." Ed doubled over with a screech and collapsed to the gravel shoulder. Penn dropped to his knees and hugged him close. Ed's fever was growing fast enough that Penn could feel the heat rising off him. "What the fuck did you do to him?" "He will be a burden no longer," Babbitt shrugged. The Ifrit burst into flames and flashed overhead, streaking upward and flying above the city like a comet. Penn lifted Ed and hurriedly put him in the cab of the truck, shut the back and climbed behind the wheel. "Don't worry, Ed." Penn pulled onto the road in a wide U-turn across traffic. "I'm going to get you to the hospital, and then I'm going to beat the shit out of that genie." "Ifrit," Ed said weakly. "The hospitals can't help me." "Hospitals can fix anything," Penn lied. "The Ifrit were created from the first flame in the universe." "How do you know this shit?" "I read a lot." "You should be reading Dr. Seuss or something, not... I don't know." Penn waved his hands. "Not whatever the hell you're reading." "Dad didn't leave me any of those. He left me books on magic." "I thought you said your dad was some scumbag talent agent." "He left because he wasn't my real dad. Mom had too much to drink and told me it was my fault too." "No, that doesn't make it your fault. Your real dad is probably much cooler than that guy who was just a chicken shit. But not the point right now." Penn shook his head. "If not the hospital, then what do I do to save you?" "Get Babbitt back into the bottle." "Easy enough." Penn grabbed his phone out of the console and pulled up the internet app. He steered with his wrist so he could type faster in the search bar. "Where are we going?" Ed wheezed. He called the bottle a prison. "Getting out of prison is something I know a lot about. When someone gets released, they want one thing." "A woman?" "No!" Penn looked at Ed incredulously. "That's the second thing. First comes real food. There's only one place that serves Middle Eastern cuisine in this part of Oklahoma." "Get him back in the bottle." Ed broke into a coughing fit, spattering blood across the glove box. He laid over and put his head on Penn's leg. "It's not your fault if you don't save me, Penn." Penn stroked Ed's hair. Strands came loose and clung to his fingers. He pressed the accelerator down to the floor. The truck crashed through the front of Saffron Palace, sending patrons of the restaurant fleeing in all directions. Penn stepped out of the cab and slammed the door, pointing the bottle at Babbitt, who sat at his table completely unbothered by the destructive entrance. "You can get back in the bottle, or I'm going to jam it up your ass," Penn warned him. "You've worked so hard. Please," Babbitt gestured to the seat across from him. "Join me for my first meal." "I'm not asking." Penn sat the vessel down. "You in the bottle, or the bottle in you." Babbitt combed back his white hair and shook his head. "You cannot threaten me any more than a louse threatens a camel." Penn slugged Babbitt square in the nose, shattering it and tipping him over in his chair. "I figured that magic lamp is like solitary confinement. The guys in solitary get soft. They can't take a punch." Penn kicked the Ifrit in the ribs. "Now get in the fucking bong." Bobbick's mustache smoldered. The bittersweet smell of opium trailed from the glowing ends as he rose to his feet. Penn backed away slowly. The threads of Bobbick's robe ignited, and the garment fell away from his naked body as ash. Penn lifted a chair over his shoulder. Bobbick's mouth stretched open until his jaw unhinged, and continued to stretch wider still. His voice emanated from deep within him. I am which was created before all else. From the first flame I took my life. You, child of the mud, are born in my shadow, he said. You suck at talking shit. Penn lunged forward, swinging the chair at Babbitt's face. A fiery cloud launched from Babbitt's maw and engulfed the furniture. Penn let go and jumped back, gasping at the remains already scorched to a cinder between him and the Ifrit. The creature laughed. Smoke oozed from his pores. Yellow-brown perspiration dripped from the wiry hairs of his broad chest. The glow returned to his eyes, and his skin combusted. Bobbitt clutched Penn's arms, searing his flesh and tossing him effortlessly across the restaurant. The fiery figure stalked the room, leaving burning footprints in his wake. The ceiling tiles darkened overhead. Penn crawled under a table only for a fireball to set it ablaze. He shot from beneath it and ran to the kitchen as more flaming orbs streaked past him and ignited the furnishings. Penn pulled his shirt over his head to examine his wounds. The creature's handprints were black spots of charred flesh. Jesus, I look like a fucking whopper. The plastic swinging doors melted into a puddle as the Ifrit pushed through them. Bobbitt turned slowly to face Penn. Where is your bravado now, little louse? He growled. You know what the hardest thing about getting out of prison is? Penn asked, looking around the kitchen for a weapon. He grabbed a large, curved knife and pointed it at Bobbitt. Enlighten me. The Ifrit touched the point of the knife. The blade glowed intensely until the tang cooked through the handle, and Penn tossed it aside with a shriek. He continued moving away from the walking inferno. The hardest part is knowing the whole fucking world went on without you. Everyone lived their lives, moved on, and did their own thing. The creature paused and cocked its head. This is true. Everything changes when you're locked up. No one gives a shit that you're gone, and the world isn't the same when you come back. So much shit has been invented that you can't keep up. Bet you never even heard of Ansel. Penn grabbed a pot and slung the boiling oil at the Ifrit. The liquid flared to life, burning everything in its path. Secondary fires flashed around the kitchen. Bobbitt's laughter boomed. He stepped toward Penn and raised an accusatory finger. A gout of flame speared outward and contorted into a flame sword that stopped inches from Penn's face. Then, the Ansel fire suppression system engaged. First came the high-pressure blast of chemicals that extinguished everything, followed by the blanket of heavy foam that knocked both combatants to the floor. Penn pushed himself up and slipped about until he got his footing. He spat the non-toxic but non-tasty foam from his mouth. Bobbitt sobbed on the floor in a quivering mass beneath the white sudsy blanket. His flesh was charred from the fire-suppressing agents. Let's get you back in the bottle. Penn grabbed Bobbitt's arm and the burnt flesh stripped away in his hands. Ew! The Ifrit curled into a fetal position as his cooling skin crumbled and broke away, leaving a human-shaped briquette on the floor. Fuck! Penn kicked the corpse and it shattered into soggy ash. You weren't supposed to die. I need you to fix Ed. Something stirred among the debris that used to be Bobbitt's ribcage. What the shit? Penn knelt to inspect the movement. He dug his fingers through the slog, revealing a green fist-size orb stretching open within the Ifrit's body. The red poppy petals pushed through and twisted open. The petals shuddered, and the oversized flower moved shakily across the ravaged organs beneath it. Penn touched the petals. The flower twisted violently and the 4 vice-like fangs buried deep into Penn's hand. He jumped back, howling in pain. The fake flower lost petals as Penn shook his arm violently, revealing the creature whose back it grew on. Its spindly legs fought for purchase as it was slung back and forth. Penn banged it against a countertop, freeing himself from its bite. At a cost. He grimaced at the exposed bone before reaching for a towel to wrap around the wound. A cowering cook ran past Penn and into the wrecked dining room. Penn ignored him and followed the monster's tracks through the foam and out the service entrance to the alley beyond. He groaned. The overhead lights left pools of piss yellow between the restaurants and the nearby buildings. "Come out, Babak," he called. The Ifrit did not oblige. Thin digits caressed Penn's bare shoulder and squeezed the tense muscles, sending a ripple of goosebumps up his spine as he whirled around. The creature wasn't there. Just the cook. The diminutive Iranian man glared at Penn from behind thick lenses that occupied entirely too much of his dark face. The man held up the magic bottle. "You forgot this," he said softly. "It seems to be missing the cork." "Shit. I hadn't thought of that." Penn took the bottle. The man reached into his white smock and produced a cork of his own. He held it up, showing Penn the burned-in hexagram on its wide top. "I think you'll find this one fits perfectly." The man scampered away. "The fuck am I supposed to do with the bottle?" The cook stopped at the door. "Put the Ifrit back inside. Do you know nothing?" "As a matter of fact, I don't." The cook rolled his eyes and sighed. "Ifrits don't like light. Flush it out, nail it to the earth, invoke the name of Suleiman, and return it to its vessel at once to undo any wish it is granted. It's not that difficult." The man disappeared inside and slammed the door. Penn's shoulders sagged. He put the cork between his teeth and pulled out his phone, flipping on the flashlight. "Okay, I got light and a bottle. Where do I get nails? I don't see a hardware Oh, motherfucker!" Penn cast the light down and found the source of the sudden pain. He lifted his foot, and with it, the broken slat of a pallet. He slid down the brick wall and pried the board loose. The rusted nails squeaked as they passed through the rubber sole of his boot. "Oh, good. Now I have nails." He panned the light around. Nothing moved. He tilted the phone under the dumpster beside him. The monster screeched and lunged from its cover, attacking the phone and knocking it to the ground. It scurried away and Penn crawled after it until he could get his feet under him and run. The thing's 10 legs carried it much faster than Penn could hobble. It cleared the alley and found itself in the glare of a streetlight. The Ifrit screamed again and bolted around the building. Penn rounded the corner and searched for the thing. Then he saw the back of his truck sticking out of the side of the building. Ed was slumped against the tires, his clothes saturated with sweat and his face void of color except for the explosion of freckles. A clump of hair blew away from his head on the breeze. Bloody spittle dripped down his chin as his body spasmed with weak hacks. Penn slid to the ground beside him. He hugged the boy and stroked his cheek. The fever was gone, but Ed's skin was deathly cold in its wake. "Come on, kid, you saved me. Stay alive long enough to let me pay you back." It's okay," Ed moaned. "At least I'm with my friend." Penn wept as the boy fell limp against him. The Ifrit shimmied out from under the truck and stared at the two humans with its beady red eyes. Its fangs spread in a clicking hiss that sounded like perverse laughter. The monster moved forward slowly, crawling across Ed's wilted form. It watched Penn cry. But the man didn't move. Babak took tentacle steps onto his thigh, and then stood tall and repeated the evil cackling. "What was it you called me, Kazam?" Penn sniffled. He wiped his nose on the back of his hand, still clutching the broken board. Child of the mud. Wasn't that it?" Babak blinked each of his 6 eyes. "Guess that makes me part of the earth." The board met Penn's thigh with a sharp, wet smack. Babak squealed beneath the wood with nails pinning him in place. Penn pressed the board down harder and spat the cork into his free hand. He placed the hexagram against Babak's face. Smoke roiled at the contact of the divine symbol and infernal flesh. "In Suleiman's name, get the fuck in the bottle." The creature's flesh vibrated, shifted, and burst into a cloud of brackish smoke that swirled around the neck of the ornate glass vessel. Penn stuffed the cork into the top, sealing the Ifrit within. His head thumped against the tire and he hugged Ed close. "I'm sorry I was late, kid." Janet adjusted the flowers in their vases. Her hands shook as much from stress and heartache as from the lack of a drink. She hadn't had a drop since Penn returned without her son. She wouldn't touch it, ever again. Ed only ever had one friend, but the flowers seemed to come from everywhere. Even some lady in New York sent some. It seemed all the time Janet spent in a bottle, her son spent, touching the lives of others. None of them were his friends. Just Penn. The rest sent cards explaining how Ed helped them, how the words and smile he shared touched them. She reread the cards and broke down in tears again. Penn placed a hand on her shoulder. She slapped it away. "I never knew what he was doing when I'd send him away," she said, holding up the cards. Penn took them and flipped through the stack. He'd read all of them several times. "Ed told me magic is just a toy without a battery." He set the cards next to the flowers and took a bag of gummy worms from his pocket. He'd picked all the other colors out to leave only Ed's favorite red and green ones. He put one between his teeth and slurped it up before offering them to Janet. She smiled softly and plucked one from the bag. "What's that even mean?" she asked. "Ed shared his magic with people that needed it. He got that from somewhere. Maybe you fucked up in how you showed it, but you still loved him, or you wouldn't be crying in a bag of gummy worms with me. That was the battery to his magic. Love." "They still don't know what happened?" Janet said. "Severe allergic reaction," a small Middle Eastern man said from behind oversized glasses. He stepped into the room and slapped the iPad against his palm. "Possibly something found in the second-hand moving blankets inside Mr. Pennington's truck." "Pennington?" Janet glanced up at Penn. Penn pointed at the man. "You're the cook." "Obviously not, since I am clearly the doctor," he nodded happily. "And you are Casper Marion Pennington, are you not?" "Wow, your parents hated you," Janet said. "Yeah," Penn pinched the bridge of his nose. "I am. You should be more careful of the things you allow a boy to play with," the doctor scolded him. Ed turned away from the harsh glare of the overhead fluorescents with a groan. "Mom? Penn?" "About damn time you woke up, kid." Penn rubbed Ed's shaved head. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was in a car crash." The doctor cleared his throat. Penn squinted at him, then turned his attention back to Ed. Janet shoved him out of the way and snuggled her son. Penn sat on the corner of the bed and dug in his pockets with a groan. The skin grafts were tight and pinched. Ed pushed his mother's hair out of his face. "Mom, you're smothering me." "I'm sorry, baby." She kissed his cheek. "For so much." Penn put his hand on her shoulder again, and this time she let it stay. "Good thing you woke up when you did," Penn said. "Why's that?" Ed asked as excitedly as the recently resuscitated could. "Because you almost missed the coolest, most fun holiday there is." He handed Ed a narrow box with a ribbon around it. Ed opened the box and smiled, holding up the prize inside. "I can't believe I forgot." "That's right, kid. It's National Kazoo Day." The end. The Black Museum by John Oak Dalton. They were taping the Halloween special at the Visitor Center in Ipswich because they couldn't afford Salem at Halloween, but fuck it, Steve thought. The rumor was this was the last season of the show anyway. He would just say in the cold open they were in Salem, and who would know the difference? There was a guy with a Jim Abbott rookie card, which wasn't worth much, but the guy was telling a good story about seeing him play at the University of Michigan. So they'd probably use it in the episode. They only had a trickle of people here wanting their junk to be appraised for the show, so they would have to take what they had. Junkin' Coast to Coast had been broadcast for 17 years on a second-tier cable channel and had been steadily declining in viewership since the original host had the temerity to kill himself. It used to be called Junkin' with Joe, but Shit with Steve didn't have the same ring to it, so there you go. The bitch of it all, in Steve's mind, was fucking Joe died with a belt hanging around his neck and a bunch of furry porn around his feet, but all of that has been conveniently forgotten, and Steve was never going to be considered as good as the original guy. His videographer Yvonne had the baseball card guy squared up on a head and shoulders shot and was half turned away, texting somebody. She had been his primary shooter on the East Coast, and since the budget of the show kept shrinking year over year, they traveled less and less and stayed closer to New York. And Steve's other videographers in other parts of the country dropped away. But even though they spent a lot of time together when they were shooting the show and stayed at the same hotels and ate together every night, they never had hooked up. Never even brushed hands. Yet Steve felt like Yvonne was breaking up with him. This old lady comes up with another fucking Blenko vase, and then after that was a lull. And Yvonne stepped out into the cold night and called somebody. Steve watched through the windows of the visitor center. When she hung up, Steve went outside to confront her. "Are you looking for another job?" "It's the last show of the season, Steve." "Yeah, but we're starting again in Portsmouth in January, and people have always cleared out a bunch of shit over the holidays." Yvonne shook her head. "I'm hearing this is it. Even if it isn't, I gotta keep an eye out for me." Steve pointed at her cell phone. "Who was that?" Yvonne just shrugged. "It was Rich. He's on that dive bar show now where they show people how to fix them up and make a new drink menu, that kind of thing." "You mean where he fucking went when he cut out on Junkin?" "That's not how he sees it, but yeah. The asshole who hosts that. We were at the Upfronts in Boston with the network guys, and he was a douchebag to everybody." "Yeah, but Rich says that's only when he drinks." "The whole premise of the show is him fucking drinking." "Well, Rich says he needs a second shooter, so you're the first shooter on my show." Yvonne just looked at him, then slides her eyes back through the window of the visitor center. Steve follows her line of sight and sees a guy in coveralls with a little book under his arm. And fuck my life if that isn't probably a Civil War diary about somebody nobody gives a shit about. So Steve just set his jaw and Yvonne followed him back into the visitor center. A blast of warm air and close smells hit them. "Hey, thanks for coming out to the show. If you'll sign this release, we can sit down and I can check out what you have there." The guy looked pretty nervous up close and only gives a little bird-like nod. While he's scratching his name on the clipboard Yvonne holds out to him, the fake smile dropped from Steve's face. "Hey, can I look at this while my videographer sets up real quick?" "Sure, man, that's why I brought it," the guy said. "I found it when I was cleaning out my uncle's attic. He passed over the summer." Steve swallowed hard and takes the small, soft-edged book while Yvonne gets ready to clip a lavalier microphone on the guy. Steve frowned with distaste and puts the book down quickly on a nearby table. Both Yvonne and the guy look at Steve with surprise. "Take that mic off. We can't talk to this dude," Steve said with finality. The guy in the coveralls raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey man, I just want to know what I have here." Steve looked at him steadily. "It looks like you have a diary bound in human skin, and I don't dick around with shit like that." Now the guy looked more surprised than he did before. He holds his hands open wide. I didn't know that. You said you got that from your uncle? Maybe you should turn that over to the police." "The police? What? It ain't like that." Steve just shrugged. "I don't care what it's like. I'm not going on camera with a book made out of somebody's skin." Yvonne retreated behind her camera and doesn't check her cell phone for once. The guy in coveralls looked through the window of the visitor center to the darkness beyond, where nobody else is coming to bring their old crap tonight. Then he looked square at Steve. "Okay. This is the straight story, man. I'm a plumber, okay? I work for the city. We get this call there's water running out of this old abandoned building way down by Choate Bridge. We go down there, water running across the street. Eventually, I gotta break into the place and look for a busted pipe, see? This is the most boring fucking story that involves a diary made of human skin I have ever heard." Okay, so wait a second. I get in there, I shut off the pipe, I start looking around a minute. This old boarded up place is full of all kinds of shit. It looks like medieval torture shit and a bunch of other stuff. I don't know what it is, but there's probably some money in all that, right? But I can't haul all that out with my partner just outside, so I grabbed this book off a shelf and I thought I'd bring it here tonight, see if this shit was worth anything. My grandma watches your show, you know? Steve is actually able to ignore this comment because his mind is working. "What's your name, dude?" Why you gotta know my name? I'm not calling the cops. I just want to know what to call you. Jimmy Corey. So what other kind of stuff was in this place, Jimmy? Jimmy shrugged. Maybe some other weapons, some guns and shit, but I'm not touching somebody else's guns. I have a feeling that was a good idea. Just hang loose for a second. Steve lifted his chin and Yvonne follows him to the corner out of earshot. Yvonne looked at him like he was crazy. Yvonne, I think this dude here found a black museum. Yvonne arched a brow at him. A black museum? Jesus, not that kind of black. Calm down a minute. Now I have to calm down? It's not that kind of black museum. The original was in London, but now it refers to any place where somebody has collected artifacts from various crimes on the circuit. You know, the world we live in. Sometimes you hear about private collectors. You mean people that, like, want a picture a serial killer painted, shit like that. I mean, that's a mild example, but yeah. We've never seen anything like that come through. You sure that's human skin? Yeah, it is. So what do you want to do? Steve looked back at Jimmy. We need to get this guy to take us to that place. What? Why? Just trust me. And when we get there, don't stop rolling tape for anything. My contract says I'm done at 7:30. Steve shook his head angrily. Forget about 7:30. We're looking at season 18. Believe me. Uh-huh, Yvonne said flatly. Season 18. A few minutes later, Stephen and Yvonne piled into Jimmy's panel van and headed towards the river. You ought to do a whole show on the Choate Bridge, Jimmy offered as they got closer. It's one of the oldest bridges in the United States, if not the oldest. Well, can someone take that bridge down and bring it into the Ipswich Visitor Center? No? Then it can't be on the fucking show. Jimmy just shook his head. It was just an idea. And when did you shave your beard? What? He's talking about Joe, Yvonne threw in. Of course he's fucking talking about Joe, Steve thought. Never, Jimmy. I never shaved it. Jimmy blinks owlishly, then steers the panel van into a gravel lot next to a large dilapidated building with the bridge looming close by. Close enough that the brackish water seeped through the gravel all around them when they stepped out. Steve looked around. Somebody could urban renew this shit, put in a boardwalk, turn this into something. It's gotta fit with the history. It's how we do things around here, Jimmy answered as he fiddles with the latch where a snapped-off combination lock hangs. Yvonne crowded in closer to Steve. There's some sort of shape over there. Looks like a dead raccoon or something. Jimmy doesn't turn around. I'm a plumber for the city. If it ain't got at least one shoe sticking up, we don't check it out. Steve was about to ask Yvonne if she was rolling, get her focus back, when something came out of the darkness ahead with a sound like thwip, 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 and suddenly the blackness around Steve was total. When Steve next opened his eyes, something warm was running down his face, and he knew it was blood because Yvonne was directly in front of him, and blood was running from a scalp wound on her head, too. Near her was a guy dressed in all black, with an ugly face tattoo and, fuck if the guy wasn't swinging a bola from one hand. Jimmy stood stiff-legged off to the side, watching as Yvonne stumbled in a loopy circle and carefully put the camera on the ground, seemingly in a daze. Then the man in black uncoiled like a serpent and let the bola go. The rope wrapped around Yvonne's neck, and the two steel balls at the end clapped against Yvonne's skull, and her legs went out from under her, and she quit moving. Steve's vision swam. Jimmy's voice, growing shrill, cut through the gathering dark clouds. You said you'd let her go! The man turned his gaze on Jimmy, who took an involuntary step back, but he kept on with his protests. You said you'd let my girlfriend go if I got him here. The man in black's voice skipped down Steve's spine. I did set her free. It was the last moment you have before reality sets in. Jimmy licked his lips. Where is she then? Over there. Jimmy didn't want to look. Behind them boxes? Behind them. What didn't fit in them? Jimmy fell to his knees, his eyes rolling back in shock. The man in black took a step forward, pulling a 6-inch blade from an unseen sheath and opening Jimmy's now convenient throat, from ear to ear. Steve watched the blood make a bright red arc before he passed out. When Steve awoke this time, the man in black had been busy. He'd strapped Yvonne, still only semi-conscious, to some sort of torture device that Jimmy had described as medieval. But the strained part awake in the back of Steve's mind told him, despite the terror flooding all the other parts of his brain, that it wasn't built that long ago. Maybe as recently as the 70s. Could have been a sex toy somebody built in their garage or a prop from some chintzy B-movie. Steve's mind snapped clear when the cold eyes of the man in black sought him out. "You're back with us, junk man," the man said, and Steve thought, "Oh, we gotta do this shit like that." Steve got to his hands and knees, then slowly to his feet. He surveyed the torture device from a short distance with a critical eye. "So, this is a black museum?" "Your unfortunate friend Billy did not lie about that. I've been quietly working on my kingdom here for some time, and the pieces are almost complete." "That bola? It was used by a teenager in Mexico City in the early 2000s. He threw it off an overpass through a bus window, killing the driver and causing the bus to flip, killing dozens of children. He was listening to a band called Clowns Eat Little Girls, and he said in court the music told him to do it." "And the knife?" "It's a caution, with the serial number filed off, of course. Translates to Kitebird. A former Russian Special Forces soldier used it to kill more than 20 prostitutes in the Balkans throughout the 90s before Interpol caught up to him." The man in black lifted Yvonne's chin with one pale hand and studied her skull like you would a piece of fruit in the produce aisle. "We will start with this device." And something in the voice now made Steve's hair stand on end. It was built and used in the early 70s by the man who became known as the National Road Killer, and many a poor hitchhiker with fewer prospects than this young woman spent their last hours here. He turned his eyes back to Steve again. "But you can set her free. All you have to do is assist me with the final pieces of my red puzzle. So I can end up like Jimmy? Thanks anyway, dude." Yvonne mumbles, "Steve!" The man in black frowned, and his disapproval is like a hand closing around Steve's throat. "The simplest switch on this device starts moving joints in ways they should not go. Then it gets more complicated from there, for your friend." Steve barked out a laugh. "You got this all wrong. She's not my friend. She works for me. And you can get camera people by the bagful in New York." "Fuck you, Steve!" Yvonne cried out, her voice warbling with desperation. "It's the gig economy," Steve shrugged. Steve's comment even brings this stone-cold killer up short. "Do you not even want to know what I want you to do?" "Lay it on me, Scribbleface." The man in black waved the Russian blade in a slow, lazy arc. Then it disappeared with a whisper, back into its sheath. "This is a grand blade, one that has taken many lives. But several years ago, an elderly man brought a knife to your show, and you sent him away after telling him that the blade was worth very little. That man was named John Wallace Hanson, and he died last year. On his deathbed, it was alleged he revealed he had killed a dozen women with that blade, but was never caught because he'd made a pact with the devil. He was probably never caught because of his fabulous wealth, which he also ascribed to his pact. I believe that knife now rests with his daughter. I need for you to reach out to her and offer to reevaluate that knife. Then do what you have to bring that knife to me. Where does she live? If it's Peoria, it's going to be a minute. As it happens, she lives very nearby, in Salem, where you taped the program her father appeared on. Steve shook his head. You got something wrong. We never taped a show in Salem. We couldn't get in there this time either. You had a beard back then. The pain in Steve's skull cleared, but his eyes began to see a red haze. I never had a fucking beard. It was many years ago. I've hosted the show for 7 years. No, before that. Before that, anger flooded through Steve's rubbery limbs. That was the other guy! Without realizing what he was doing, Steve lunged at the man in black. His hand instinctively went to where he had seen the tattooed man slip the knife away, and suddenly Steve had it by the handle and was pushing the blade upward, and it went under the man's chin and through his tongue and stuck somewhere in the roof of his mouth before blood began gushing out through his teeth. He fell to his knees as Steve had watched Jimmy do, and with that in his mind, he picked up the bola from where it lay on the concrete floor nearby and pulped the other man's skull with it until even the twitching stopped. Steve started undoing Yvonne's bonds with blood-slicked hands, and as he looked closer at the device, it was a fucking good thing it never started up. He might have puked. Yvonne, what I said, it was bullshit. That guy was never going to fucking let us live after I did what he wanted. Steve, what I said, I meant it. Fuck you, Steve. Fair enough, I got you into this. We both got hit in the fucking head. That's not great. We both said some shit. But I did what you told me to. I never stopped shooting. Steve stops untying her for a short moment, surprised. What? I never stopped shooting. Steve looked over at the camera Yvonne set on the ground when they first walked in. Oh shit! 18 months later, everything was working out fine for Steve. He wasn't charged with anything, and the footage made him kind of a hero. There was a renewed interest in his show, but Steve got too big for it, and now was about to host a special on a major network, live from the original Black Museum in London, with the current curator from New Scotland Yard answering his questions. He'd invited Yvonne to join him as a producer, but she didn't want to leave the dive bar show. She had ended up hooking up with Rich, so maybe that was part of her plan all along. Rich and Steve had mended fences, and Rich told him Yvonne hardly ever woke up screaming anymore. Of course, as soon as Steve was cleared by the cops, he went to Salem and found the daughter, and bought the knife with what savings he had left. The daughter had heard the rumors too, and was happy to get rid of it. Not for fucking free or anything, Steve noted. The first couple of days, Steve didn't do anything with it. But eventually, he went down to the dumpsters behind his Astoria apartment building at night and waited for the rats. A couple of nights after that, and he finally hit one after getting pretty good at throwing the knife, and also having plenty of targets. The very next day, a woman who had dumped him came back into his life, and they went to bed together right away, and then she moved in a few weeks after that. But before she decided to move in, Steve was able to kill another rat with the knife, and the next day an ant he never fucking saw anyway left him a couple of grand. So fuck it. He started figuring out this dark web shit and advertised the knife for sale to collectors. And he zeroed in on a guy in Philly who bragged about having his own black museum. Steve drove out there one weekend, and this dweeb started showing him all the stuff he had squirreled away before he showed him any money. Steve's trained eye instantly saw his Hitler stuff was lumpy bullshit, but the serial killer paintings were probably real, so as soon as he killed the guy with the knife, he took the paintings and a couple other things. The next day, the network had called him and offered him the live show. So he was going back to the dark web. These creeps shouldn't be buying that shit anyway. And guess what? He didn't have to sign his name in blood in a book or go to the crossroads in some southern town at midnight. And if he actually did make a deal with the devil, it was like he told Yvonne. TV was the gig economy. He'd probably already sold that shit.
Well, my spookies, that's our last ride of the night. If your cotton candy happened to turn to cobwebs, or if your prize winked at you when you looked away, consider this a friendly reminder. The Midway never gives anything for free. If you had a thrill or three, bring a friend back. Share this episode. Drop a quick rating on your favorite podcasting app and make sure you are subscribed so we can punch your ticket again every Wednesday. Until the gates creak open again, keep your fingers out of the gears, your wishes to yourself, and your heart far from the grabber claw. I'll catch you all next time.